or a town council, then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the speaker. The committee then asks questions of clarification of the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on the application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hands clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I'll ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. As is my privilege as chairman, I have varied the rules on speakers for item 1. I've allowed each parish to have 5 minutes to speak to the item so that we can hear from each of the parishes. And I've allowed our MP to have his own slot so as not to reduce the time available for supporters or objectors. There are a few housekeeping announcements. In the event of emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediate to the right of this meeting room, and then go to assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services officer present will assist you. Can everyone please ensure that their mobile phone is switched to silent or switched off during the meeting? Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been heard are welcome to do so by the front door in reception. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. That was item 1 on the agenda. So item 2 is apologies for absence. We got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Ali Gordon-Creed.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting to adopt and sign as a correct record of the planning committee meetings in the meeting held on 13th of August. Matthew,
Yeah, can we also on the minutes from the July 2nd meeting, on the item for Station Road car park, in the minutes it's been recorded as 250 homes could be accommodated on the site. It should be 215, 215. As those minutes have already been approved by this committee, I just need your approval to go in and just make that change from 215 to 215 instead.
Correct. Is everybody happy with that?
Right,
thank you very much. Declaration of interest to receive declarations of disclosable peculiar interest, other registered interest and non-registered interest, or any conflict of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Councillor Topping, come back to Tim.
I have one on item 8, New Road, Lower Ship Lake, where a client of mine expressed an interest in this site, and I made a call to the owner back in March, April, so I prefer not to take part in the debate or vote.
I'll see your advice on this. I work for Freddie Van Mierlo, so I don't know how that.
I think it's not on. He's speaking on an item, but he's not the applicant or is not making a decision. I don't think that's urgent business to receive notification of any matters which the chair determines should be considered as urgent business and special circumstances which have made the matters urgent, or to receive any notifications of any applications deferred or withdrawn.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is something I'd just like to raise. The committee papers were published in advance of the council receiving the recent inspector's letter in relation to the joint local plan. The council received the inspector's letter recommending that the council has not met the duty to cooperate in section 33A of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, which cannot be remedied during the examination on the plan. The council is assessing the position and no formal decisions have yet been made on the next steps, but this letter is a material consideration in applying weight to the plan. The starting point for decision taking remains with the policies in the current adopted plan. The joint local plan is at an advanced stage of preparation, carries some weight. Where unresolved objections have been received on policies, limited weight should be applied. But where there are no unresolved objections, moderate weight can be applied. Full weight should only be applied where relevant, following the outcome of the independent examination and on adoption of the joint local plan. Okay, so that's our current position on that matter. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Sure, the committee will take that into account. So agenda item 6 is the public participation. As I said, we'll take each agenda item and the participation with the agenda item. So we move on to the planning applications. And it's agenda item 7, which is P25 S1653, the former Arian's factory site in Hazing Trading Estate. Planning officer is it's Nicola, of course it is.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application that's been made by South Oxfordshire and Vale of the White Horse District Councils for the change of use and redevelopment of the application site to become the base for the waste and street cleaning fleet of vehicles that serve the districts, as the lease on the current site at Culham is soon to run out. The site is located just off the A329, south of the M40, and midway between the villages of Great Hazley and Great Milton. Access is gained to the site from Rectory Road via 2 existing accesses to the south. A triangle of woodland, which is to be retained, is located to the west of the site, between the site boundary and the A329. A public right-of-way runs along the rear of the site to the north. The existing use of the site is B2, which is light industrial uses, with the previous occupant manufacturing, storing and distributing grounds maintenance machinery from the site. The site is currently dominated by buildings joined to form a single mass on the plan. And the proposal is to remove all but one of the buildings and lay out the remainder of the site for parking of vehicles. The retained building would be used for staff facilities and maintenance tasks on the waste vehicles, and parking for the waste collection and street cleaning vehicles would occupy the western side of the site, whilst parking for staff vehicles would occupy the northeastern side of the site. The proposed use remains an employment use, albeit under a different use class. It complies with the relevant employment policies in the local plan and is suitable in principle for this use. The application site is already quite well screened by landscaping on all sides, and it's proposed to enhance that landscaping, particularly on the northern boundary adjacent to the public right-of-way. These sections show the building to be retained together with the waste vehicles in the context of the existing landscaping surrounding the site. These photographs show the site in the context of Rectory Road. On the left faces towards the junction with the A329, and the photograph on the right faces towards Great Hazley. These photographs show the accesses into the site. On the left is the access closest to the junction with the A329. The buildings in the foreground are all to be removed, and this will be the access used for the waste vehicles to enter and exit the site. On the right, the photograph shows the easternmost access to be used for staff vehicles. With some minor improvements, the County Council have confirmed that the accesses are suitable for the proposed use. These photographs show the route of the public right-of-way past the site. On the left, looking into the site, on the right, passing through the northern edge of the site, and the picture in the middle shows the right-of-way as it passes the northern boundary. Landscaping will be added to fill in the gaps, such as shown on the centre picture, where there are views into the site from the footpath. This photograph shows the building to be retained, which is the large grey building in the foreground. This building will be renovated, removing the large opening on this side and adding a new roller shutter door on the other side, as well as personnel doors and windows. Indicative locations for solar arrays on the roof are provided. Inside, the building will be amended to include maintenance bays for the waste vehicles, storage, offices and welfare facilities for staff. And within the site...
Georgina and Freddie are in the lobby, apparently, the link they were sent.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Georgina and Freddie are both in the lobby, online. I don't know if they can be let in.
Online?
They're online, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not showing up. there. Currently using the link there is sent. Yep, I'll resend it to them. Okay.
Right.
And within the site, there are a mix of buildings, most of which will be removed under the proposed redevelopment. And the building at the bottom here is the one to be retained. You will shortly hear from the local parish councils who will talk about their specific concerns. However, much of the concern raised is to do with the traffic generated from the proposed use of the site. The applicant has submitted a transport assessment to support the application, which compares the proposed traffic movements to the base level and the previous use, and these are accepted by the County Council. The transport assessment shows that the trip rates associated with the proposed use of the site is quite different to that of the previous use, which had a typical daily trip profile associated with a light industrial use, including a significant peak in the morning peak rush hour time, and then a reasonable level of activity spread throughout the rest of the day. Whereas the proposed use has two significant peaks in traffic movement. Firstly, between 5 and 7 a.m, when staff will arrive and then leave in the waste collection or street cleaning vehicles, and then between 12 and 3, when waste collection vehicles return from their rounds and staff will then leave in their own vehicles. There will be a minimal amount of traffic movement at other times of the day, notably avoiding the usual peak traffic periods between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. and 4 and 5 p.m, meaning that traffic generated by this proposal does not overlap with peak traffic. To provide a bit further context on the traffic movements in the early morning, I can advise that the councils do not collect waste before 7 a.m, so the earliest movements from the site will be street cleaning vehicles leaving, with larger waste collection vehicles leaving from around 6:15 to 7 a.m. On the wider network, and I'm just going to skip back to the map, the County Council has, in their response to the application, acknowledged the concerns raised by residents, particularly of Little Milton, focusing on the possibility of two larger vehicles meeting each other at the pinch point where the A329 narrows as it passes through Little Milton. The response to this is set out in my report at paragraphs 7.26 and 7.27 and explains why the County Council considers this to be acceptable. I'd also refer members to the recommended condition number 23, which requires a vehicle routing management plan to be submitted, which should include timings of vehicles leaving and returning to the site each day and the routes they will take on the immediate highway network. I would also advise members that the Highways Officer is in attendance virtually if members have specific questions about traffic movements. My report sets out the other considerations that are material to this application and concludes that the proposal complies with the policies in the local plan. The technical consultees are all satisfied with the application and have recommended some conditions. Therefore, I've recommended permission subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 3 of my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Okay, public speakers. I have a number of public speakers. The first one I've got on my list is Malcolm Forsley from Great Milton Parish Council. Thank you. Would you like to take the table there, please? And you will have 5 minutes for the moment you start speaking.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today, Malcolm Horsley, councillor in Great Milton Parish Council, and I'm here to represent the council and our residents to explain the motion should not proceed in its current form. Our concerns are not about resisting change, but about ensuring transparency, fairness, environmental protection, and community well-being. The first and most fundamental issue is transparency. The council has admitted that 474 alternative sites were considered and that one was seriously shortlisted. Yet the identity of these sites have been withheld along with cabinet papers explaining how this location was chosen. This council is in the unusual position of being both the applicant and the decision maker. That conflict of interest makes openness absolutely essential. Without sight of the alternatives, parish councils, residents and this committee cannot assess whether the chosen site is justified. The Information Commissioner is now investigating the council's refusal to release this evidence. Proceeding before that review is complete risks undermining public confidence in the integrity of this committee's decision. Turning to material planning grounds. The depot would generate a substantial increase in HGV movements along rural roads never designed for such traffic and designated as such by OCC. Great Milton and Little Milton already experience congestion from school traffic, agricultural vehicles and narrow pinch points through their centres. Around 70 vehicles are expected to return to Little Milton each day, precisely when the primary school finishes, which is on that main road. The applicant's transport assessment underestimates the risks to pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders who use these routes daily. This is not a minor intensification. It represents a fundamental change to the character and safety of our local road network. The site lies close to homes, as you saw on that map, farmland and heritage assets. Noise, vibration and diesel emissions from a fleet of waste vehicles will erode the quality of life of nearby residents. Operating hours, early mornings and evenings will bring continual noise disturbance. Light pollution from floodlighting will affect both residents and wildlife. These are not abstract concerns, they are real measurable harms. We are also concerned about the ecological implications. The applicant's own bat emergence surveys carried out by Bioscan found potential roosting features in both the main building and tree T025. Although no roosts were confirmed, the report recommends a precautionary working method statement and strict lighting controls to protect foraging bats and the adjoining woodland. These safeguards must be binding planning conditions with ecological supervision so that the council applies to itself the same standards it demands of others. This area is home to significant local employers, notably Le Manoir au Cassaison, a flagship for Oxfordshire's tourism and hospitality sector. Introducing an industrial waste depot in such proximity risks damaging the attractiveness of the wider area as a visitor destination. This is not only an environmental issue, but an economic one. The proposal contradicts the council's stated aims of supporting a balanced and sustainable local economy. The Manoir employs over 150 people, soon to be more. It is poised to expand to maintain its position as one of Oxfordshire's leading hospitality venues. Approving a waste depot next door risks undermining that investment and the decision to invest, local employment and associated community benefits, such as the sponsored bus service in Great Milton. The application conflicts with South Oxfordshire local plan in several respects. It fails to protect the distinct rural character of the villages. It does not demonstrate sustainable access to the strategic road network without unacceptable harm, and it conflicts with policies on air quality, noise and residential amenity. Finally, members, I urge you to consider the broader public interest. The council is both the landowner and the applicant. Residents are entitled to expect the highest standards. Sorry? Expect the highest standards of transparency, fairness and environmental stewardship. Approving this application while critical site selection evidence remains undisclosed would set a damaging precedent. We ask the committee to refuse this application on the grounds of traffic harm, environmental impact and policy conflict. At the very least, we urge you to defer any decision until the Information Commissioner has ruled on the withheld site selection evidence. Anything less risks eroding public trust in this committee and in the council's integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsley. Well done on your time. Now, committee, has anybody got any questions for Mr. Horsley? I see none, so thank you. Oh, one, sorry.
Do you have any indication from the Information Commissioner about the length of time that such an inquiry might take?
Unfortunately not. The problem I had was we submitted a Freedom of Information request at the end of June, beginning of July. We were told we'd have a response by the 1st of August. The day before it was due, we were told by SODC that they wanted to extend for a month, which took us to the beginning of September. The response that we had was so heavily redacted, didn't have the information that we were looking for. I asked for an internal review. The response was, I will get back to you beginning of November. I complained and said, could you do it by the end of September? Because the planning committee was coming up. I heard nothing until I reminded our councillor Georgina Heritage, who I think prompted someone, and they responded last week. So I've only just put the complaint in the last few days. So we're at that point, I'm afraid, due to delays.
At this point out, we're our planning committee, and not a strategic committee.
I understand that.
Must be to do with planning. Yes, Councillor Griffin.
It was just a question on timing. You said that you were very worried about the afternoon school pickup, which is normally at what sort of time?
3 to 3:30.
3 to 3:30. Nicholas said that the afternoon return of the vehicles started at 12:30. Am I right?
Can we go back to that?
3. So
If the right
by
procedure has been-
3:30, that would have been done, over.
If you believe that, fine.
Well, I can only go on what we're told, and those are the
I
facts as
understand
we
that.
understand them, that by the time the lorries,
Can you-
they will all be back in by the time the schools come out.
I have to fundamentally disagree with you. But okay.
Councillor Topping, can we
Yeah.
discuss that after
Yep,
this?
yep.
Okay.
By all means.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hosling.
Sorry, another question.
Sorry.
Sorry, can I just pick up? You said you received some information from SODC, but it wasn't the information that you wanted.
They refused.
Can you tell me what you wanted then?
I wanted the cabinet papers. I wanted to understand what the other sites were that were investigated. I'd like to have an idea as to why it's taken 7 years to get to this point. A whole load of things.
Can we again?
It's nothing to do with planning, but
planning.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Hosling. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor David Wakeling from Little Milton Parish Council. Welcome. And again, you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Chair, members of the committee, Little Milton joins with Great Hazley, Great Milton and Stanhampton in strongly opposing this application. We fully support the detailed arguments put forward by our neighbouring parishes, but today I would like to highlight 2 critical concerns specific to Little Milton. The unacceptable increase in traffic, especially HGVs through our village in direct contravention of county policy, and the worsening of an already critical wastewater problem. The pre-application advice from SODC clearly stated that, and I'm quoting, the potential impact of this proposal on Little Milton is a key consideration that must be assessed as part of any future transport submission. This requirement has been completely ignored. There was no assessment of the impact on Little Milton, a clear failure of process. This omission alone should be grounds for rejecting the application, or at the very least requiring a resubmission with a full transport assessment. The application admits the depot will add around 500 extra vehicle movements per day to the A329, more than 100 of them HGVs on at least 2 days a week through Little Milton. These HGVs will begin moving through our village from 5:30 in the morning, with workers' cars starting from 5 a.m. That means that our morning peak traffic period will be more than tripled from 1 hour, 7:30 to 8:30, to 3.5 hours. Oxfordshire County Council's own freight and logistics strategy designates the A329 as a local access route, not suitable for through traffic or connections between larger towns. Yet OCC has chosen to ignore its own policy, arguing that using the M40 or A40 would cause operational implications. What are those implications? No data was provided to support this claim, and journey time modelling shows that using the appropriate HGV route via the A40 adds at most 1 or 2 minutes to journeys to towns in the south of the county. Little Milton is a rural village. The primary school and houses, including 12 listed buildings, are only a few feet from the road, which has very narrow pavements and several pinch points. Does saving 90 seconds on a half-hour journey justify the noise, disturbance, safety risk and disruptive impact to our rural village, let alone abandoning the county's HGV policy? Surely not. I note that the report presented by the planning officer states that some of the concerns of Little Milton can be mitigated by a condition to restrict the number of waste vehicle movements through the village to only those absolutely necessary to serve Little Milton and the surrounding villages. Little Milton Parish Council would strongly support such a condition, but let's be clear, a condition is only as strong as its enforcement, and we would expect robust monitoring and penalties for breaches. Moving on to wastewater. All the wastewater from this site will be pumped to the Little Milton treatment plant via the existing pumping station, a system that is already at, or in fact beyond, breaking point. For years, Thames Water has had to park tankers on the narrow Hazley Road to compensate for this system's failing. This isn't occasional. It happens for months each year, all day and all night. These tankers cause noise and inconvenience to residents. They've damaged property, including knocking the parapet off the bridge into the Gainsbridge Brook, partially blocking the brook and contributing to the recent flooding of several houses. To make matters worse, the frequency of raw sewage discharges by Thames Water into the Gainsbridge Brook has soared year on year, from 4 days in 2020 to 168 days in 2024. Your planning officer refers in her report to the many concerns raised that the water network in the area is overburdened and will not cope with the additional wastewater arriving from the development. She states that this is supported by anecdotal evidence of recent failure of the wastewater system, but that conversely, Thames Water offer no objection to the proposal. But this is the same Thames Water that has repeatedly failed for many years to properly address the existing issues. It is your duty to consider the evidence, and this evidence demonstrates incontrovertibly that there is a serious and growing problem here, one that Thames Water have shamefully not addressed and have no plans to address. The villagers of Little Milton know it, our district and county councillors know it, our MP knows it. And it's obvious that adding a large amount of additional wastewater from washing 50+ vehicles can do nothing but exacerbate the existing critical pollution and public health issues. How can this be acceptable? It's clear this application was rushed. The need to replace the Culham site has been known for years, but it appears that very little was done to address this need until the last minute, when the council selected the Great Hazley site in what appears to be a bit of a panic. We recognise the pressures the council faces, but that does not justify ignoring county policy, ignoring critical infrastructure failings, or sacrificing the well-being of communities like ours. You as committee members have a clear duty. Enforce the planning requirements that you set. Uphold OCC's own transport strategy and protect residents from demonstrable harm. On behalf of the residents of Little Milton, we urge you to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeling. Committee, have we got any questions? I see none, or there isn't one. That's the topic.
Well, I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to talk about timings, but again, we have a bit of a conflict here in terms of the timing, because you were worried about HGVs from 5:30.
Yes.
Whereas I think we heard from Nicola that the HGVs would not start moving until 6:30.
With respect, that's not stated in the application. Unless I've missed it, it's not stated. I can only comment on what's in the application.
Sorry, we're talking about the application,
Yeah.
not relevant to what Councillor Wakeling said. So I think
Well, it's
we'll
just
move on to that one. We'll discuss it later, but it's not the right time. We need to hear from the speaker first.
In the application, it says
Councillor
5:30.
Chandler.
It does state timings in there. I think Councillor Tottenham's quite right to mention that.
I'm not saying
something different.
I'm not saying we're not going to discuss it. I'm not saying, all I'm saying is it's not the right time to discuss it in the procedure. We will discuss it later on, not with the councillor, but with the planning officer.
Okay. But so if I could just say, it is a key point. The timing is a key point.
I take that, and we take that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Our third speaker is Councillor David Lindsay from Great Hazley Parish Council.
He's online.
He's online.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So you've got 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, I'm David Lindsay, the planning representative of Great Hazley Parish Council, and I'm speaking to formally object to the planning application for a waste depot at the former Arian site. Whilst Great Hazley Parish is supportive of the site continuing its employment use, we have serious concerns around how this application would be delivered. Ultimately, this proposal is in open countryside. It endangers our rural character, safety and environment. And we urge you to refuse it to protect our community as it conflicts with the SODC, Local Plan 2035 and the NPPF. First point is the lack of a binding odour management plan. The applicant's response offers only general assurances on odour, deferring any OMP to a later stage. This approach leaves no binding safeguards for residents or the council to rely on. Simply stating that odour will be managed in line with best practice is not a substitute for detailed site-specific OMP that defines containment methods, maintenance regimes, monitoring frequency and response procedures for complaints. With this submission, the applicant demonstrates a concerning lack of rigour on any issue that directly affects the public amenity and environmental quality. Without a defined OMP now, prepared, reviewed and enforceable prior to determination, there is no practical mechanism to prevent or investigate nuisance once the site becomes operational. The omission conflicts with NPPF paragraph 174 and policy strap 1, which requires development to safeguard the character and tranquility of the countryside. The council should not accept vague promises of future management when the burden of odour impact will fall squarely on nearby residents. This also impacts the lighting harm in the dark skies area. So Great Hazley, which borders the Chiltern National Landscape Transition Zone, has no streetlights, minimal light pollution, a priority area for our future parish plans. Whilst the emerging local plan is not to be progressed, policy CE11 reflected the most recent evidence and guidance on this matter, setting out a number of criteria that should be met, including specific existing guidance within the setting of the national landscapes. Notwithstanding the reference in paragraph 7.18 of the officer report, this matter has not been assessed correctly within the officer report. It being fully referenced only in the ecology impact section, nor indeed has it been addressed by the applicant within their LVIA. Also, the proposed 20 lighting columns at 8 metres high will cast a glare across fields, disrupting wildlife like bats and owls, which are protected under Environment 1 and eroding our dark skies. SODC's design guide required low impact lighting. We're going to demand 6 metre columns, which have been halved in a number with downward shielding. Without this, it's breaching Environment 1 and MPPF paragraph 180C. Road safety risks on Rectory Road. Rectory Road is a narrow lane with no pavements. It's our only route to the number 46 bus stop at the Manoir. The route is used daily by children, families, and mobility impaired residents. The proposed 80 daily HGV movements will turn this quiet road into a danger zone, with winding bends and widths as low as 3.5 metres. SODC's TAIP policy demands safe access, no mitigation, addresses pedestrian risks with no suggested improvements for pedestrian accessibility to the bus stop for those working at the site. One single HGV pedestrian collision could be fatal. You need to refuse this or you need to require a full safety audit. There is a noise impact on nearby homes. Dwellings on Rectory Road are just 190 metres from the site's eastern boundary. They face significant harm from operations including HGV idling, reversing alarms, and waste compaction. British Standard 4142 indicates a +5 decibel impact here, which is classified as adverse. The assessment underestimates early morning noise. Independent verification is needed. This is going to violate Environment 1 and MPPF paragraph 185, which will be shattering the rural peace. Again, this is unsuitable siting for the Vale and SODC. It's 30 miles from Farringdon. This site is poorly located to serve the Vale of Whitehorse. It requires 80 daily HGV trips across Oxfordshire. The DEFRA emission models estimate this is a 15 to 20% increase in CO2 per trip compared to a local site. This undermines your own net zero goals against the local plan as well as policy DES 10 and air quality standards. A depot closer to Vale's waste sources will cut emissions and congestion. There is also little assessment of the overall sustainability credentials of the build and operational phase of the proposal, nor what commitment is being given to the consideration of the use of electric vehicles. The suggested conditions, notwithstanding our concerns set already, the wording of some of the conditions does not appear to be precise or clear. So for instance, condition 11 within the construction traffic management plan should be worded, no development shall commence until. Condition 25, the improvements to public rights of way contain contradictory requirements linked to occupation. In any event, these works should be in place upfront prior to first use of the site. And condition 27, the odour management plan, this should be required prior to first use of the site as permits. The wording as set out does not make sense. Given the nature of development being permitted, i.e. change of use, conditions which start prior to first occupation are not appropriate, nor is it clear what this means. So in conclusion, this proposal completely eradicates the value of our open countryside. It breaches multiple policies. It risks safety, pollution, and our rural identity. In order for this to be an acceptable agreement between the owners, the occupiers, and the local community, it requires a significant overhaul and should therefore be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Emsley. Okay, committee, got any questions? Seeing none, so thank you very much for your time. Could I ask you one question? What odour are you concerned about?
Well, just a general odour from lorries once they've been stacked with rubbish all day. I mean, we've all smelt a recycling truck or a bin lorry drive past us. Even when they're empty, they do carry a significant odour. There's no information set out around how these are going to be cleaned, and with people living less than 200 metres away, the smell will travel. There is a mention of the prevailing wind within the application, but the wind doesn't always blow in the same direction. Also, the odour which this site is going to emit has been likened to spreading of muck on fields, which I think only serves to show that the person writing this doesn't live in a rural community, as that is something that doesn't happen 365 days a year.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, committee. The next speaker is withdrawn. and for our next speaker is going to be our MP, Freddie Van Mierlo. I see he's online. It was a minute ago. There he is. Okay, Freddie, you have your 5 minutes like everybody else.
Brilliant. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to speak in support of the residents' concerns on the impact of this proposal, which will have an impact on the safety and tranquility of their villages, as a result of the HGV movements associated with the site. Of course, I'm very familiar with the site. I was the county councillor covering Little Milton up until this year, I think, and have listened to representatives made to me by parish councils and individual residents who've got in touch with me directly. I am concerned that these are inappropriate rural roads that will see large increases in HGV traffic. I've raised these issues already directly with the applicant, SODC, and with the Highway Authority, and have worked closely with the relevant councillors. I am very grateful to the engagement of officers of both authorities for their constructive discussions. I would like to draw your attention as committee to the comments made by the Highway Authority in their revised response to the planning application on the 16th of September. The County Council will respond that OCC agree that it's not preferable to increase the amount of refuse vehicle movements through Little Milton. That's paragraph 28 of that response. The Highway Authority do qualify their remarks and say that the movements will be at non-peak hours and that waste vehicles are smaller than HGVs, but I do remain concerned at the volume of traffic being generated. And I have been disappointed that no work has been carried out by the applicant to explore the feasibility of rerouting traffic proposals in the transport assessment to avoid Little Milton, wherever possible, taking advantage of the A40 and M40. This failure on the part of SODC means you don't have the full information in front of you. It's possible for traffic leaving the site, especially in the morning, not servicing the local area, to be routed via the A40 and Oxford bypass. And I do ask yourself if it's necessary for vehicles travelling as far as Farringdon or Wantage in the Vale to trundle through our villages. I believe this council should take greater account of the impact of its operations on our residents, and should not behave as just any other applicant, the ones we all so often complain about. I think we should ask of a higher standard of the district council. I urge the committee, therefore, to support the condition proposed by Little Milton to restrict HGV movements through the village and to only serve the immediate area. I also suggested this to the leader and to members of the cabinet in my letter, and to officers of this council, all confirmed it is possible. Failing this, I ask the committee to support condition 23, which is outlined in your report pack on vehicle routing details. That's page 55. The condition proposes that prior to first occupation of any part of the development, a full and detailed vehicle route management plan should be submitted and approved by writing by the local planning authority. And I urge you to make sure that this plan takes full account of the concerns raised today on behalf of all the residents of Little Milton, Stadhampton, Great Milton and Great Hazley, and urge you in your deliberations to consider very carefully that this vehicle routing management plan does have within scope consideration of the impacts to local residents, and encourage your council to do the full work of investigating the feasibility and costs of making use of the A40, M40 to reduce the need to travel through Little Milton. Thank you, Planning Committee and Chair, for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Novello. Just on time. Quick committee, any questions for our MP? I see none, so thank you, Alex. Thank you for your time, Freddie.
Thank you.
Right, we'll now move on to our supporters, and the one person making most of the speak, I think, is Trevor Dodkins, who's the agent. Person, there he is. Okay, like everyone else, you have 5 minutes from the moment you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank planning officers for the well-considered report, recommendation and their presentation this evening, which was very clear. My name is Trevor Dodkins of Phase 2 Planning. I represent the applicants. We also have some members of our wider team, particularly technical specialists, with us here today. If you do have any technical questions, they're more than happy to answer
they're
those.
named on the thing.
They are named on the. This is a brownfield site. It's long established as a factory with a range of large buildings, mostly 2-storey in height, with associated areas of hard standing. The site can be used again for B2 and B8 use without further permission being required. It is not a greenfield site. It is not open country, sorry. The application has been submitted as proposals fall outside of the B2, B8 use sui generis. But this does have a benefit in that it allows the committee and it allows officers to be able to control the use of the site through appropriate conditions. In terms of background, the statutory waste services function for both district councils is currently undertaken by a private sector provider who operate at a depot known as column number 1. The council needed a new depot site that has sufficient infrastructure to support its operational fleet, as the current site will cease to be available as it and surrounding land is proposed to be redeveloped under the local plan, and the current waste service contract ends in 2026, June 2026. The application follows the applicant's assessment of many other sites, and we've heard some about that today, and which were rejected. And the application site remains as the only one that can be justified in planning and environmental terms. The other sites are irrelevant. There is one site before you this evening which has to be determined on its planning merits. In terms of the proposals, the proposal accords with policy AMP3 and 10 in redeveloping previous developed land and supporting the direct employment of approximately 200 individuals. We've had some discussion about the transport assessment. These were undertaken in accordance with county guidance and the industry standard best practice, and confirms that firstly, suitable access can be delivered with an improved arrangement over what exists at the moment. Secondly, the internal layout has been designed to meet the operational needs of the development, provide sufficient parking. And thirdly, the offsite impact is such that it would not lead to a severe impact. In terms of air quality, officers have agreed that the risk of significant construction phase impacts is negligible, and impacts from operation phase road traffic emissions are not significant. In terms of odour, while the risk for odour emission from the site activity is low, it is agreed that an odour management plan can be secured by condition. In terms of noise, potential noise impact arising from the development has been assessed. This includes on-site operations such as vehicle manoeuvring, maintenance, cleaning and refuelling. Off-site noise from vehicles on the local roads has been considered. The assessments show that the impacts are acceptable and can be suitably controlled by robust conditions to protect residents' amenity. In terms of drainage, as part of the redevelopment, the site's drainage system is undergoing a major upgrade. New sustainable drainage will be installed in areas being converted to parking using permeable paving. Drainage for the converted building and access roads will be retained and upgraded to handle heavier rainfall, reduce flood risk and improving water quality. In terms of external lighting, we've heard about that this evening. The current lighting arrangement is traditionally uncontrolled floodlighting. We've designed an external lighting scheme to meet both the operational and security needs of the development. This provides a low level of visual impact at the site boundary, equivalent to that of moonlight. And that does show that we are providing low impact lighting. We've read all responses from interested parties, including parish councils and technical consultees, and the proposal has been revised as it's been progressed through pre-application and through the application process. It should be noted there are no objections from planning officers,
Last 30 seconds.
or any technical specialists, for example, council highways, including rights of way, LLFA, archaeology, Thames Water, as we've heard, and also district council specialist officers on heritage, ecology, landscape, noise, air quality, odour, trees, contamination and environment. The application has been the subject of thorough assessment and close liaison with officers and consultees. Changes have been made to overcome concerns raised by consultees, none of whom objected.
Thank you. That's your 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. Committee, have we got any questions? Lots. Lots. We'll go around that way. So, Councillor Higgins.
And you said there were a number of experts, and I presume we can bounce them around. I don't know, but there've been a couple of comments about use of different roads for the A40 from one of the parish councils suggesting that added a de minimis amount of time. Freddie, who just spoke, saying he'd spoken to cabinet members and they said that was a possibility. Do you have a view, a technical view on that?
We do have a highways consultant here. I'm sure I'll be happy to answer that.
Can you come to the table to speak, please?
Okay. Yeah, as part of the assessment, we looked at a range of different distributions for the development traffic, which is in liaison with highways to consider different scenarios. And the conclusion of those is, regardless of where they're routed, the impact is acceptable in highways terms. So hopefully that sort of helps. Plus, there's also the aspect of securing further detailed review of that as part of the condition, which has been suggested and it's agreed by the applicants.
Yeah, so I think there are sort of various degrees of strengths as conditions being suggested. So I thought that would be worth clarifying. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll cede if that's all right.
Can I just interject on that one? You said development traffic just then.
As in the operational traffic.
The operational traffic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions on transport?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go on, Tim.
So your colleague said that it would not lead to severe impact on the network, and you clarified that there, that the traffic impact said that would be the case. But you also said that it would be controlled by robust conditions. What robust conditions do you envisage?
The conditions that suggested, I can't remember which one it is. 23, where the route management, the management of the route, that way that there can be discussions over what is the preference, and whichever is the preference for all parties, that can be determined through the routing. Yeah, condition number 23, vehicle routing details. That is to allow that to be reviewed further. I mean, ultimately, from a transport perspective, we're talking about the vehicles routing through, in particular, those sensitive villages. And as has been outlined in the officer's report, that would not conflict, the development of operational vehicles would not conflict with the network peak hours. And so the network peak hour vehicle flows are around 1,100 vehicles in that peak hour. At the time when vehicles will be moving, the sort of circa 50 HGVs, which are coming from the site, are coming, the equivalent total volume of traffic is only around 400 vehicles. So by comparison, it's a lot lower level of traffic when those operational vehicles will be departing the site in the morning. As I say, 50 extra contributing in total to around 400 with the background traffic versus the peak hour where there's around 1,100 vehicles. So you can see there's a big difference between those. If it was a peak hour, that would maybe be different, but that's at a time where there's less likely for vehicles.
I understand. So the condition that 23, it would if we were to sign this off today, that would the traffic management impact assessment would be done separately, and that would come back to the council for approval.
That would be done in liaison with the highways officer and ultimately signed off by the council.
But the planning committee or by delegation to officers. Delegation to officers.
Yeah, Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, Mr. Dodkins, you mentioned about the previous use of the site. Do you know how many movements per day were taking place on the previous usage and what type of vehicles they were?
Come back to me, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's around about 400 to 500 over the course of a day is roughly what it was. We haven't got a survey of the old operation, but this is from using industry standard, they call it TRIX data, so trip rate information to determine how much traffic could be arise from that site. And that is what it could lawfully be reused for again, even if the current occupants, obviously the former occupants weren't there. If someone to bring that back into use as the same land use, that could be what could arise from that.
And so, were they cars, vans, HGVs?
That was total traffic. But in terms of the existing use, we didn't have a survey of that to precisely understand it. But I understand it was because of the use as farm machineries and bits and bobs. There probably would have been deliveries. There would have been staff vehicles, so cars and the like arriving, plus deliveries by vans. And I should imagine there'd probably be large sort of 10-metre rigid style HGVs, which would have taken deliveries more longer distance, I should anticipate.
That's a topic.
I think it was Freddie who brought up the question of an immediate area condition to restrict the vehicles going through Little Milton to ones that were serving the immediate area. How realistic would that be to impose and enforce?
That is something that can be worked through with the future sort of contractors when they're sort of appointed to get the service contract, I should imagine. But it's probably worth noting as well that at the moment, with the assessment that we've done, it's assumed that there can be some sort of variation in that routing, and it's only 2 days a week that it'll go through there currently. And that's just based on an initial sort of review of likely where the ultimate destinations and where they're likely to route to. But as was mentioned, I heard earlier, at one point or another, sometimes there can be a case of a slightly longer version, if it's only a small amount of time difference could be considered. So it may well be when we have the contractors on board looking at it and they're looking at this in more detail for themselves, which is something that happening in association with undertaking the work required to discharge the condition. That may be something that comes out of their review anyway. They have a more preferable route to go a different direction because they have an operational preference for themselves. So I think realistically it can happen, but it needs to have the most appropriate time is to use that condition. The initial assessment that we've done shows that there isn't an overlap between the network peak and when the operational peak is, so that uplift is at a quieter time. But also that regardless of vehicle traffic is moving one way or the other, in sort of operational safety capacity terms, that is acceptable. So I think from the main sort of point of note is that either way it would be okay in highways terms, but because there is a desire to sort of control it one way or another, we have a mechanism to do that, which is the condition.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, so my question is not about traffic, but about liquid effluent. I know that the councillors have rightly brought up the question about liquid effluent, and I do note in the report that you've got interceptors, which is very good, so you'll be able to filter out any petrol and diesel spills, which is great. But given the nature of the kind of washing that's going to be going on with these vehicles, I couldn't quite work it out from the report, but is it that you might get solids inside the washings, and how would that be treated? How would that be, would there be some sort of tank where that's held before it goes to liquid effluent? Because it looks like Thames Water's kind of basically said it's okay, but lots of people around that area know perfectly well that all is not well with the drainage system around there. So these are very valid concerns. So what could you say about those concerns?
If we finish with transport, then I can go later.
Yeah.
We go on.
Unless there's any more questions on transport.
Transport. Yep, sorry.
I've got one which is sort of sustainability transport related. So, and I'll have some questions for the officer in terms of how our policies apply, but it might be useful clarification from here. So in 7.57 it says, and the sustainability conditions, journeys will be no different in terms of the logic of the sighting versus current cycling in colour. That seems a very sweeping statement, and I can't possibly see how it could be true with a site in the far northeast of the area. In terms of sort of sustainability, journey to net zero, presumably we've been using this site for a very long time, and we have aspirations of there being electrically powered or hydrogen powered fleet coming out of there at some stage. Is there any colour you can offer in terms of what's being planned for the site from that perspective?
Well, I think there is a general move towards electric vehicles, and there certainly will be a number of, I can't think of the exact number at the moment, but there, I think it's in the report, but there will be a number of electrical charging points for electric vehicles. But I think the general aim is to go over to all electric at some stage.
Okay, and you talked about having appropriate infrastructure. Presumably, we've got an electricity connection that will provide for that in the long term.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, that
Just to add to that point, sorry, there's a proportion that are going to be available from the outset, but there's also going to be ducting in to allow retrospective addition to that later on for more. So that goes to what Trevor was saying of as we move towards more installation, that's already been catered for up front, as it were.
And has there been any sort of assessment done in the interim, sort of the carbon emissions from this site in operation versus the existing site using existing fuels?
Not as part of the transport assessment work anyway.
Sorry, Councillor Norman.
That was me. Yes. So most of my questions bits of them have been answered. But can I just ask, was there a traffic modelling study done?
So there was a junction capacity model done at the Rectory Road junction, which reviews adding. Well, first of all, we recorded baseline traffic surveys to understand what's currently happening, recording the number of vehicles that are passing. And then what we do is we add background growth to a future year. And then we add the development traffic, the operational vehicles, on top of that and review how that works at that point. And that was undertaken.
So that's around the site. But was modelling done on the flows from that site to the rest of South Oxfordshire and the Vale?
Not the whole way around, only more locally, and that's because when you get beyond the local area, there's already refuse vehicle on there, and there'll be relatively the similar sort of travel pattern. It's only more closer to the site that there's a significant difference, which is where we have looked at it.
Okay, so and do you know offhand what percentage of, when you look at that site and you look at where the rest of the two districts are, it appears that a great deal of the traffic will go southwestwards down the A329. Do you know what percentage of all the vehicles, operational vehicles, will go down the A329?
The review was including that out of the 5 days during the week, 2 of those days be able to come to and from the south, which would go through through Great Milton, etc. And the other 3 days they would turn right and not go through that village.
And it is divided up in that way, is it?
Yes, that's in the transport assessment, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. What subject we're going to cover now?
Can we have lighting?
Lighting.
Wastewater.
Yes, wastewater first.
Yeah, wastewater.
Thank you.
I'm James Bailey. I'll be answering the question on waste. So what was could you just, I'll try and go over it again. If I can remember it. So essentially in the report, I see that you've got interceptors to deal with oil and diesel spills, which is great. Obviously what's being talked about a lot in the report is the washing down of vehicles. And obviously, we don't know what that looks like in terms of waste vehicles because it doesn't describe that in great detail. But obviously, the local residents are very worried about Thames Water's ability to kind of manage existing sewage arrangements in Little Milton and right the way down to Southampton. There's all sorts of problems there. So some kind of assurance, but how are you going to manage that liquid effluent from the site? So they will be washed out initially before coming back to the Great Acre. Is that at the transfer station? Is that at the transfer station? Yeah, so they'll be washed out there originally. Then when they come back to this proposed site, they will then be washed out again. And any debris that's in there, which shouldn't be any at all, will just be collected in the interceptor and they'll be emptied at various heights during the course of that week and the interceptors are filled up if they ever get filled up. Right. Okay, so
I'm having difficulty hearing you.
how are you? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So the interceptors will collect the debris, and then those so that debris will be managed through the interceptors. It would be just like any other any other debris that were to go down there would be managed as well. So there would be a maintenance regime to empty that at various intervals.
I'll go to Councillor Norman, who's persisting with his hand in the air. So,
well, it's because it's closely related to Ed's question. So, is the effluent from this site not, in fact, going to be connected to any Thames Water processing place at all?
The interceptors will hold that effluent there.
Within the site?
Within the site, yeah.
So there's no effluent leaving the site. So Thames Water's saying that this is all fine. It's because they're not actually going to deal with water at all. It's not going down to a local sewage works, for example, in Little Hazley or anywhere else.
No, not that. No.
So the local system is not having to deal. The local sewage system and wastewater system is not having to deal with this at all. It's all dealt with on site.
That area, that part would be dealt with on site. Any of the other water that flows down there obviously would dealt with, but any of the effluent would be held there.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask a question on that? Because it talks about liquid effluent in the report, and that's why I asked the question about.
I think that's probably
okay. So we'll ask the
we'll answer that.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't clear from the report whether the washing of these vehicles, and I'm pleased to hear this is a second wash, that the first wash is done where the vehicles are emptied, because one would hope that that would deal with the majority of the problem and the smell. But my question was, is this activity going to happen inside the retained building, or are they going to be washed in the open air?
It's in the open air.
It is in yes, so it's not within the retained building. No. Okay.
Yeah. Right, so we can cover the washing and odour. Any other subjects you wish to cover?
For the first gentleman, I have a question.
Sorry, Mr. Stocking.
Yes, I'm so sorry. That's all right. I'm not good with names. So that you mentioned the extant planning permission for that site, and I think I understood you to say, and I think it's fairly clear from the officer's report, that as a matter of fact, these activities could have taken place, strictly speaking, without further planning permission. Is that correct?
In terms of,
and can you explain what sui generis means in this context?
Sui generis is a well, it's obviously a Latin word, but it basically means that it's unkind.
Yes,
it's a use that is fairly unique. It often involves a mixture of uses, so that it doesn't fit neatly into one of the other categories. I think in this case, it could be argued that what we're proposing is a B2/B8 type use. But we've decided not to go down that road, and we agreed that at an early stage with officers, because it is a fairly unique use, but it is akin to a B2 or B8 use. But as I said at the beginning, the point is that by bringing this under the planning regime, it is controllable, it's subject of an application, it's subject of determination, and it can be subject of conditions if they can control the use. Whereas anybody else coming in, it's completely unregulated.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we going now? One more question.
Lighting.
Lighting.
Can we talk about lighting? Yeah, one of the parish councillors, I think it was from Great Hazley, talked about the lighting columns being 12 metres. Did I hear? Am I right?
8 metres.
They're 8. Oh, well, that's a lot better than 12. I'm also pleased to see that in the condition that these would be sensitive lighting that would presumably turn itself off if there is no immediate movement. But it would also be right, would it not, that the lights would not be on at all before 5 o'clock in the morning when the site starts its operation? So there'll be no lighting at all before 5 in the morning, and presumably none after 5 p.m, which I've written down as being the complete end of the day, by which time this site would be emptied of people and activity. So there should be no need for lighting after 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Am I right in making that assumption?
Yeah, so that'll be the lux level, the lighting level will be no different to moonlight at those periods.
Yes, but the moons aren't on all the time. There's phasing. So, you know, if one wants to protect bats and others, it would be better if the lighting was not on at all when the site wasn't in operation.
I think there will be an element of security lighting.
Right.
That is programmable, so that you know, when you've got bats flying through it, it won't come on.
Right.
If you've got foxes going through it, it won't come on. If you've got larger animals or people going in there, then it will. Well, that's my understanding.
Yeah. Well, they seem quite detailed, these conditions, which is encouraging. So it's 8 meters, not 12.
Yes,
that's quite a difference.
Okay, committee, are we?
Councillor Gus.
Yeah, Councillor keeps around. Yes, just one thing. Great Hazley raised the fear of noise from idling. Is this likely to be a problem? Idling of engines from these things? Because that gives rise to both odour and noise, and presume, and it's something we ought to, you know, really control. Is it a realistic problem?
We've got experts on it. Idling.
Good evening. Leaders, I'm an acoustic consultant. So idling can be controlled through a management plan. So you know it makes sense to do that. Switch engines up when they're not needed.
Yeah, so that we to make sure that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, from environmental points of view as well, as well as noise and nuisance. Okay. Thank you.
No. Sorry, I was just going to confirm what your specialism is.
Oh, apologies. Acoustics, noise.
Acoustics. Okay. Any questions on noise?
Well, now we've got an acoustics person here. Yes. So I think in the report it says that noise will be between 35 and 39 decibels. I think it gives 2 different figures for different periods of the day or something like that. I'm sorry.
So in relation to the mechanics shop and the washdown, is that?
I'm afraid I don't know, because I wasn't expecting to ask the question on noise, because I didn't know we were going to have an expert on noise.
Okay.
But it's definitely in there.
So perhaps I could talk to the washdown and the operations in the workshop. They've been assessed in accordance with the relevant standards and shown a low impact. And we've suggested some acoustic screening to the perimeter to screen the washdown operation as well. As a
condition is also recommended to ensure the plant is selected to achieve cumulative rating sound levels of no greater than 39 decibels and 31 decibels during the day and night respectively.
Oh yeah.
So that's in 713.
Yeah. So that is for the washdown area and for the mechanics workshop.
Okay. Could you give us an indication of how much noise 39 and 31 is? We're normally told something like, you know, a rustling of paper is such and such.
We asked him to make a noise.
So the sort of background noise in here when we're not really talking would be around about 30. Background sound levels in the area I dropped down to around about 30 decibels at night. So what we've done is we've taken that as a benchmark and worked backwards to set a rating level. That's the 39 and 31. Then can then become a design target for the operations and to protect the people.
Would that cover outside when there are lorries running?
Yes, yeah, that would cover operations on site.
It would, because they sound very low. Actually, I do have some idea what that scale means, and they sound very low.
Yeah. Sorry,
say there were 30 lorries starting up at once, is that still going to be under 39 decibels?
That may not, but then that's part of the vehicle movements on site, and as we said, they're not going to be idling on site. So the character of the vehicles on site itself will be very similar to vehicles on the A329 and the wider network. We expect a good deal of massing.
Okay, committee. I had lots of notes down here, but I think we seem to cover all the aspects that I wanted to talk about. Are we all content? Can we move on?
I just can I just ask correct on noise? So, just to follow up on that, the A329, I mean, the decibel level there is significantly higher, isn't it? I mean, that's the reality. What are we talking? But passing traffic along the A329, quite a lot.
Yeah, it's quite high. So within 10 meters, I'd expect levels about 65 decibels.
I have a question about lighting, but are we going to get? Will we have an opportunity to ask?
Yeah, an opportunity to ask.
Thank you. It's more appropriate.
I just want to move on from this particular point on the agenda and let Mr. Duncan sit down again with his. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's very useful. Thank you. Right, so the next speaker is online, and it is Georgina Heritage, who's the local member. There she is. Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, Georgina. Like everybody else, Georgina, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
We can quiz you.
Thank you. Well, my contribution may be somewhat redundant now, but thank you, Chair. I appreciate a lot of questions have been asked, but I'd nevertheless just like to highlight concerns that I've received from residents, even if committee members feel they've heard and understood many of the salient points. As a cabinet member, it can be taken as a given that I appreciate the reasons behind the purchase of this site. As the ward member for Hazley Brook, it's also entirely right that I should consider this application from the perspective of residents in nearby villages. It's absolutely understandable that those living closest to the site are worried about how this planning application might impact their lives, and to ask committee members to consider these concerns in this meeting. I think residents acknowledge that this is an existing brownfield site. The previous occupants operated with industrial permissions. What needs to be explored today is whether this particular planning application represents over-industrialisation of a rural area that could be harmful to the rural character of the nearby village settlements. I anticipated that other speakers would focus on specific areas of concern according to their own locality. So I'll just mention some of the objections that I feel committee members should address and possibly have to some extent. Please consider noise and light pollution from the depot once operational. Great Hazley can be categorised as an intrinsically dark landscape, and the village rightly wants to protect that. Similarly, the prospect of noise disturbance can conditions safeguard the quiet enjoyment of nearby residents. The local plan does require that developments protect the amenity of existing residents. And I hope that committee members will ask questions on this and on operational noise management plan. While aware that vehicles will return empty and will be cleaned every day, both residents and the Manoir have stressed that odour impact of residual waste on the vehicles shouldn't be underestimated. So more details on the recommended odour management plan would be appreciated, what it would look like in reality. On drainage, I've been involved in recent flooding problems in Great Hazley with the sewage overflow causing damage to properties on Rectory Road and Little Milton sewage treatment works being consistently overwhelmed. So with this in mind, I did want to ensure that the committee was satisfied on the proposed drainage measures. But for me, I wanted to put the focus really on the traffic aspect, be it noise, vibration or pedestrian safety. Can our rural A329 road structure sustain the increased volumes of traffic, particularly the HGV and wide vehicles through the narrow sections from Little Milton to Stadhampton? As discussed, it's anticipated that for 3 days of the working week, operational vehicles will turn right, and the remaining 2 days they'll turn left. The right turn takes vehicles to the strategic road network. The left turn goes to Little Milton and Stadhampton. And even Highways comments acknowledge that Little Milton is not an ideal route. It's not just the 2 mornings of the week that Little Milton and Stadhampton are concerned about. It's the return trips that may coincide with school finishing times, where there may be school buses and an increase in pedestrians. I've been involved with others in questioning the freight strategy and the road classification, But what must be acknowledged is that section of A329 is very narrow in places, with sections that have very narrow pavement for pedestrians and pinch points at which it's not possible for two HGVs to pass at the same time without mounting the pavements. I know that Little Milton has campaigned for some years to introduce a weight limit to this section of the A329. The village is now very concerned that a convoy of vehicles may be traversing the road early in the morning, close to the homes that line this section, some of it which were built centuries ago, plus the staggered return of vehicles, possibly during school leaving time, and they fear losing that quiet enjoyment of their village at best and the safety of pedestrians at worst. Committee members will have read Highways reports on this, but anyone who knows this section of road will understand its limitations. I believe that attention does need to be paid to this specific area of concern, that the strategic road network must be utilised as much as possible, that this section of the A329 is ultimately recognised as being unsuitable for HGVs and wide vehicles. So correspondence from Little Milton's residents tells me that despite acknowledgements from Highways and the A329 through their village isn't an ideal route, they don't feel seen or heard in this process. So I particularly wanted to add to their voice this evening, and I ask that committee members address the legitimate concerns submitted by residents of the Hazley Brook ward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harris. Questions? Councillor Albert.
Yes, Georgina, anybody that's been on planning training have obviously been told to look at the positives before the negatives. You give us 5 minutes of negatives. Can you give us a couple of minutes of positives with this application?
As a cabinet member, I know that a lot of research was done on this site. I know that the electricity supply was one of the key considerations to meet the needs not just now and of the future. I understand all the positives of the site itself, but as a representative of the Hazley Brook ward, as a ward member, my job this evening is to speak for the residents and their concerns on the planning application.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Topping.
Sorry, it's timings again. Georgina said she was worried about the vehicles returning during the period in which people are picking up children from schools, particularly in Little Milton. There seems to be, and this, we need to get this completely clear. I certainly think it needs to be clarified that the vehicles would be back in the depot
question
before 3 o'clock.
Is this a question for Georgina?
Sorry, I don't really have a question.
May I say?
I don't believe that we need to establish the
we do, and we will, but questions for Georgina.
May I say that, Councillor Topping, that the concern of residents is that vehicles will be travelling through at school finishing times. Now, what I was hoping was that the committee members would ask those questions to confirm whether or not that would be the case and whether or not that's a legitimate concern of the residents of Little Milton.
I think we have, Georgina, and we're given the answer that it's going to end before 3 o'clock. So as long as the schools come out after 3 o'clock, then hopefully there won't be a conflict.
Okay, thank you, Georgina.
Yes, if you could just bear in mind that I was anticipating speaking before questions were going to be asked, so I was hoping to encourage you to ask those questions. I'm glad you have.
Okay, thank you for your time. Okay, where are we? Nicola's on the chair. We're now actually into questions for the planning officer, which we should have been doing before. Many of us think. Yeah, Councillor Higgins.
Could you educate us a little bit on what an odour management plan involves? Presumably not industrial quantities of Febreze.
No. So let's get the wording of the condition. That might help. With me, 27.
Just clearly for lots of things there are standards and measurement standards.
This is not a standard kind of condition that we normally have. It's more something that you might find on, say, an agricultural use or something similar. So yeah, condition 27, a detailed odour management plan. Yeah, okay. So so I would expect an odour management plan to include information such as what are the sources of the odour, and how that is going to be sort of mitigated through the processes that will happen on site. And we've heard that vehicles will be cleaned, and actually we've heard that they will be cleaned firstly at the waste transfer station, so kind of the initial debris will come out, then it will go back to the depot for more thorough kind of cleaning. So yeah, we expect an assessment of what the odour is, and where it's coming from, where the sensitivity lies, surrounding residents perhaps. Then we've got control measures for how that will be mitigated, and also monitoring and maintenance of that, how that will be monitored and kept in check.
Yeah, because there's clearly concerns being raised by lots of residents, and clearly, unlike noise measured in decibels, it's difficult clearly to have an objective scale or measure it. It sort of either smells or it doesn't, and in terms of how we'd enforce that as well.
Yeah,
it's a difficult concept to grasp.
Sure. The information will go to our environmental health officer, and they will check over whether that's suitable. Yeah, it's not like noise where we've got a decibel scale. Odour is a little bit more by perception. So control measures including best available techniques to control the odour emissions from the site. Yeah, I think that's
I'll pass to the next one.
Yeah, Councillor Bealer.
There was an implication that the traffic could be controlled by the contractor using the site through the waste management contract that we're doing. Are we stipulating any terms in that waste management contract?
So not being in the waste management team awarding that contract, I'm not able to say. That would be that's not necessarily planning matter. So the reason why we've got
tonight that they were suggested that they could do the traffic management plan through.
Yeah. So condition 23 is the planning kind of hook to ensure that information comes through planning and secured through planning. Our contract will be awarded. That's a completely separate part of the council to planning, which is assessing this application. So yes, it may well be that the contract is awarded with those stipulations, but I'm afraid I don't have those answers. That's why we've got the condition to give it that planning hook.
Right, lots of questions coming up. I'll keep going that way around. I'll get to you. Ed.
So my question was about the liquid effluent again. It's about these interceptors and the fact that you might get debris that when you're washing out waste trucks. I would have thought that the whole point about washing it out is that you're washing stuff out, and that will create debris. That debris will end up somewhere. They've talked about permeable surfaces, but they've also talked about interceptors. I'm not sure. From a layman's perspective, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But also how those interceptors are managed, because I understood it to be petrol and diesel and things like that, because it does say that in the report. But if they collect debris in the wider sense of the word, then that opens up a big can of worms, in my opinion. Because and the question is, where does it go? Or do you let it dry out on the corner and then call it solid and then scrape it back into the bin lorry? There's so many questions there.
Yeah, sure. So we do have condition 6 covering foul water drainage, and that requires a foul drainage scheme to be submitted. So the details of the interceptors would come in as part of that.
So therefore they wouldn't be connected to the effluents. They will be connected to the
sorry, just to be clear, what we've heard is that the interceptors will take any solid that's coming out of the waste trucks. There will be liquid as a result of that as well. So the water that's not caught by the interceptors will go into the foul drainage network. The interceptors will collect the solids, as you say. So yes, I just will that condition cover the interceptors as well, or do we need a separate? I think we can add to that condition to make it clear, including details of the interceptors and the management of that waste before it enters the foul water system.
Yeah, sensibly the solids will go back in the lorry because they'll be dumped again, won't they? But the foul water.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not clean water coming out; it's dirty water coming out, but the solids will be kept by the interceptors.
Right, just keep going around. Councillor Norman.
One very quick question. One of the public objectors, or not objectors, public responses says that the location is in a 7.5 ton weight limit area. Where is that 7.5 ton weight limit area? Is there any such weight limit anywhere in that region?
So I think at this point I'd like to draw in Katie, who's online from the county council, to explain that one, if that's all right, because that does cover the Little Milton issue. So I think she would be much better placed to be able to respond to that question.
The highways from county council highways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I'm not aware of a 7.5 weight limit anywhere in the vicinity on the A329. I have checked this with colleagues when looking at our freight logistics strategy. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. There isn't one. There isn't. It couldn't be on an A road.
No, there is one on the A329, but only after Southampton.
Okay.
Except for access.
Okay.
Except for access. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm so sorry. So my question really is about lighting. I just want clarification on the legal status of the lighting arrangements. So there is external lighting is on page 34, paragraph 718, and this gives a description of how the lighting will be managed, and 719 says considering the elements, I conclude the impact on the amenity would be acceptable. So there's this kind of approval given to it there. Then on page 38, there is again the applicant, paragraph 746, the applicant has submitted a revised external lighting scheme for the site, which is all good stuff, cooler light, 5-degree tilt, etc. And again, it appears from that that this is kind of an acceptable, that you as the officer have regarded this as acceptable. However, it says actually, although the details of this are not specified in the document and will be secured by condition. And then finally, within the conditions, which is much further on, it says all external lighting, under no circumstances should any other external lighting, sorry, earlier in that paragraph it says, no, this is paragraph 18, condition 18, no external lighting will be installed on site unless and until a sensitive lighting strategy for bats is submitted to and approved. So is the lighting scheme acceptable, or does it have to go through a further hurdle?
The lighting scheme is in principle acceptable, but there are some aspects that still need kind of further clarification, and that's why we've got condition 18. to further secure that lighting, and also importantly, no other external lighting that's permitted except for that lighting that's approved by that scheme. So I think it's to do with the temperature of the light and the light level, so the coolness rather than the warmness of the light. And
so,
yeah, that's
yeah. So the entire lighting arrangements have yet to be, they are still to be approved by a condition.
The final details of the lighting arrangements. The in principle lighting arrangements are shown and they're acceptable, but the kind of the real technical fine details are yet to be approved, which is what condition 18 is for.
Okay.
And stop it. Sorry, it's timings again, but I think this is important in relation to the whole effect on traffic and traffic movements. The comments that have been made about schools and the conflict with children being picked up after school. So could we run through a typical day in the week, starts at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
The site will open at 5. I think you said the first, and just tell me if I'm wrong, the first movement out of this site would be at approximately 5:30, but that would be one of the smaller vehicles that does street cleaning, I think you said, rather than refuse collection. And the refuse collection starts at 6:30.
Yes. So just to clarify, because the information I gave in my presentation is slightly different to the information that was included in the various documents.
Right.
So the planning statement that accompanied the application said the site will operate from 5 a.m. till 5 p.m.
Yeah.
So that's quite a broad range. The transport assessment, for the purposes of assessing the traffic impacts that we've heard a lot about, identifies that the peak, and it is the peak, so that is most of the vehicles. There may still be other vehicle movements, but it would be a lot less. So the majority of the vehicles will be operating between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. and then 12 till 3 p.m. So at 5 a.m. Workers will be arriving to the site, so the site will start operating at 5 a.m. Then yes, I've spoken to, sort of after writing my report before committee, I actually spoke to the waste management team leader at the council just to get some understanding about how it works in practice. He advised that the early morning movements will be the street cleaning vehicles, and they will be leaving from around 5:30 in the morning to go and carry out their tasks around the districts. The waste collection vehicles, so the larger vehicles, will start to move from about 6:15, 6:30 until 7 a.m. In the afternoon, the majority of the vehicles will be returning between 12 and 3. And that is the peak. So there may be the possibility of others returning before or after that time. And then vehicles leaving, staff leaving in their own vehicles.
So would it be possible to have some sort of directive to the contractor who actually runs the service that they must have all of the vehicles back by 3 o'clock, or perhaps 90%, or something sensible so that we don't have this conflict with the school traffic?
Yes, in principle, I think it would be reasonable, and this can come through the condition 23 that we've talked about. It would be reasonable to sort of have a window at school pickup time in that area where either vehicles come back and are back at the site before 3, or they don't come back until after 3:30, say. So there's that window where the vehicle movements are restricted through Little Milton.
It might have to be more than half an hour, I'd suggest. But, an hour maybe.
The details that we have to balance that with kind of the operational what is practically possible. So I need to understand what is practically possible from an operational perspective.
Yeah.
How the waste collection actually kind of works.
Can I suggest that you sort of say no vehicles should be scheduled to come through Little Milton after 3 o'clock. You can't, if it's running late, then it's running late.
Yeah.
But you can't, but if you could sort of say scheduled to come back after 3 o'clock or before 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and we can.
If it's scheduled, then that's the way to do it. Yeah.
We can add that word into condition 23 to make it clear from the outset that's what the expectations are.
I think that would address a lot of concern. Yeah. Okay, I have still questions. Councillor Arlington.
Yes, Chairman, no one's picked up on this yet, but one of the speakers, one of the parish council speakers, mentioned this freedom of information and what they considered was the lack of information that came back. So I'm just asking any of the 4 officers around the table now, is there any information that should have come back to the parish council that didn't come back? Because if there is a lot of information out there they haven't received, it could almost make life debating this planning application with information that may come out at a later date, which would affect the decision.
Yeah, okay, we have a legal representative here. I'm going to ask Martin if he's able to answer that question.
So could you run through the question again? Because I'm not entirely sure I understood it. I think this was in reference to parish councillor who spoke first. Is that?
Yeah, one of the parish councillors that spoke, I think it was the second one, David.
No, it wasn't. It was the first one.
It was the first one. Okay, Malcolm Paulson mentioned they'd asked for freedom information on why this site was chosen, and what were the other sites that they looked at. What he was concerned about, that he felt there was other information out there or in here that wasn't divulged to them. So my question is, if that information was to come out at a later date, would it make our decision incorrect, or could it make it incorrect?
So it has been said before, but the question was in regards to the freedom of information about alternative site locations, and that's not a material planning matter necessarily. So no, it wouldn't affect the decision today.
Yeah, I agree. Emily wants to say something.
Yeah, what committee need to do is consider the application before them. And consider that on its merits, and as Harjit said, the other sites that have been considered isn't material to your decision this evening. You've got to consider what is before you and whether that is acceptable, and that's regardless of details on any other sites.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think we've all got a little bit concerned about what's being said. But you need to take that up outside the committee. Right, where are we going? Councillor,
Sorry,
we're going round. So yeah, Peter's next.
This waste depot, it's a function that the council already carries out, doesn't it? We always already have a waste depot at Cullen and 2, and there are all these issues about odour, noise, access, traffic. Have any of these issues arisen in respect of Cullen number 2 site where we currently operate? As far as I'm aware, we have the same traffic issues. Those vehicles coming out of that site have to go through Abingdon, over Abingdon Bridge Narrow, go over the Newton Courtney Bridge. Clifton Hamden Bridge, narrow, Sutton Courtney Bridge, narrow. So there's the same raft of problems, potentially, that we should be currently hearing all about from the current site. I'm not aware there have been any such issues of odour, noise, traffic, anything else like that. So I can't see that this new site is going to present, unless it be slightly different, but they're going to be anything particularly different. And in fact, in my own ward, I used to have those with a long memory will remember Pritchard's used to do our waste service.
He's building up to a question.
And there was a depot in my site, and I've had any of those problems. So have there been any problems with column number 2 of these nature?
Complaints of that nature would be handled by the environmental protection teams, and I'm not aware of a particular problem on the site. No.
I think the big difference is that's also transfer sites. Yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry. Right. I'm going around looking for.
Round again.
Round again.
I just want to ask about, we're going to debate about strengthening condition 23 and how we might do that if we were minded to do so. So clearly a lot of the residents' concern is about traffic through Little Milton. Yeah, there've been a couple of comments about, in fact, it would only add a minute if they use the strategic road network. They're going to be doing that for half the time anyway. Freddie had spoken to cabinet members who sort of suggested it would be feasibly possible. So could we condition that? And would that give us some more teeth as a committee? And would it help to reassure residents in that, if later down the line, actually, in practical terms, the South site found that was adding a huge amount of time, or they were struggling with it, they could apply to lift the condition, but we potentially be able to go back through the same process where if the local community were concerned about that, the parish councils could object. It could be likewise called to the planning committee, and we could, as a committee, we could exercise some, I suppose, more diligent supervision and sort of safeguarding of residents' concerns.
Yes, so yeah, we've been thinking about that during the course of the debate so far, and we can strengthen condition 23 to make specific reference to HGV movements through Little Milton, and particularly between the concerned sort of 3 till 4 p.m. period.
There's a time bit, but I think it was suggested we should say, okay, Little Milton for a Little Milton's to a defined local area.
Yes, we can. And in answer to your question about removing that condition, yes, that would, if the applicants wanted to remove that condition, firstly they could appeal against the condition in the normal way, which would obviously be considered by planning inspectorate. They could also apply to remove that condition under section 73 of the Planning Act, which could be considered by the committee.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So, yes.
Okay, have we got to the end of Councillor Sadler?
Yeah, so just on, sorry, it's labouring this point about condition 23, isn't it? But
it's fine.
So specifically, can we say, can we prohibit vehicles in those villages after 1500? Because obviously, if they're doing collections there, then they've got every right to be there. So if they're coming back from the transfer station, and I'm not suggesting they can't come back from the transfer station if they're held up there, but they don't have to go through those villages. They can go the other way. They can go around the motorway route.
Yeah,
yes,
I think that's what you said we do.
Yes,
I think,
yes, we can do that. Yeah.
There'll be a preference, I think, in that there'll be a preference for not using Little Milton route.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Can you get sorry,
I'm not sure if this is going to help, but just to lay out the general principle about planning conditions are they must follow the 5 tests of planning conditions. That is necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to development, to be permitted, enforceable, precise, and reasonable in all other respects. A condition is possible, but it would have to be carefully worded so that an off-site condition is obviously not something that necessarily can be enforced because you can't control certain things that happen off-site. But that's not to say that the condition couldn't be worded in such a way that it achieves the same objective of routing and traffic movement and times.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement, and I think that condition needs to be strengthened, but exactly how we need advice on. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. We can't word it today. You'd have to come back with some wording.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there are all sorts of implications.
But it's also how to enforce it, is it?
And it's got to be enforceable. Yeah. But then the contractor will work for the council, so yeah.
So, sorry, Chair, does that mean would we arrive at wording now? Would we have to come back with wording before we decide on the application?
I'm taking advice, but I don't think, I don't think we want to word it now because of the implications.
We can group review after the committee, so we can add wording around restriction through Little Milton other than collection days, and no vehicles are scheduled to drive through particular hours. The exact and specific wording of that we can agree with the chair after the meeting.
Okay.
So he would see the final say.
You know our intent.
Yeah, I'll have the final say, and if I'm not happy, then I'll put it again. But I'm just right. Because it's the legal implications of it, it's got to be worded properly, and we can't just make them up on the spot. Yeah. So with that proviso, I think we need to move forward. We will have a condition that says what we want it to do, which is timings and not unnecessarily going through the villages and Little Milton particularly. But I can't agree the wording on. Okay. Have we finished with that bit? Have we finished talking to the officer? Because that's the last bit we have to do before we can go to starting a debate.
Yes, one more, please.
Go on then.
So condition 6, which is about the foul drainage. I was wondering if the wording could be beefed up on that as well.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. I've made note of that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, where are we going now? I need a proposal.
We debate before, or
no, we can't. We need a proposal to debate on.
I propose adopting your officer's recommendations. Agree with this application.
Okay, with the agreed amendments. Yeah. Is that seconded? Yes, thank you, Councillor Topping. You wish to speak now?
No, I'll come in later.
Yeah, coming later. Yes, I mean, Emily wants to check the conditions. So what conditions we want changing? So, and what's the rules on the conditions?
Thank you, Chair. So condition 23, we're clear on as officers, we're going to add the routing condition, restriction through Little Milton, and the scheduling times. There's also been reference to condition 6, and we're going to add details.
So what do you mean by routing through Little Milton?
Not routing, so restricting through Little Milton and restricting the hours as well if they do have to go through. So making sure that there's no vehicle movements between 3 and 4 was what the committee talked about.
Yeah, but when you say restrict through Little Milton, what would you be restricting?
That's the problem. We need the words.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the principle of it is that other than collection days, the HGVs will have to find an alternative route other than driving through Little Milton.
Other than collection days in that
village.
If they were doing somewhere else in the
then they'd have to find an alternative route.
I guess if they were to stand up, they wouldn't want to go that way.
Yeah, absolutely a slightly wider area. So not just that village, but surrounding villages.
Yeah. And then you've got your hours that you wanted as well, restricting any collections or anything. So they couldn't be scheduled to collect, for example, in Little Milton between say 3 and 4.
And returning.
Yeah, we know they wouldn't normally do, but it's scheduled to do that.
Is that a correct understanding and interpretation of what your concerns are?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Condition 6 is to add the details of the interceptors and details of the foul water in association with this. Again, is that something that's okay? Can I also just check, because there has also been mention around condition 18 controlling lighting hours. Is this something that committee wish to add as well?
I would prefer if it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can look at that in addition to condition 18. There was also a reference as well around vehicle idling. And a condition around that. Is that something committee also want to see?
I think that's too. Well, vehicles shouldn't idle anyway. No, we shouldn't do that from an environmental and from points. So I'll be happy with that. We shouldn't do it anyway.
Should be part of the noise management plan.
Put it under that.
It's probably part of the noise management plan.
Yes, we can add it into that condition. Yeah, that's fine. So which condition, such an alteration will alter instead of an additional, will alter the condition.
Yeah. Okay. You can't do it now because it's technical to get the wording right. But those are the areas that the conditions are going to be changed, and you'll then get the right wording and come back to me
Yes.
for
yes, yeah.
approval. And at that point, I may actually let the committee know what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have a proposal for the officer's recommendation proposed and seconded.
Yeah.
We open debate. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in support of the motion. So it's very clear that residents have got lots of concerns, very valid concerns. Hopefully they're reassured by the time we've taken to probe the matter and strengthen the conditions addressing some of their major concerns. But I also think it's worth noting that, you know, it is a brownfield site, and this clearly has been through a detailed process. So, we have a cabinet and an executive who would have challenged officers, considered this in detail. I think there was a comment that 474 alternative locations have been considered, and we have a scrutiny process as well. So clearly, and not all of that is relevant to the planning application, but clearly this has been through a lot of process. I'm personally sort of reassured from a sustainability perspective as well by the detail around, the fact we've got electric charging infrastructure. We talked about connection down the line. So I think those are positive points as well. We sort of didn't get to. I'm sort of, sort of slightly concerned about, the location and the public transport access, and I think there's some work to do that through the conditions. But yeah, that's broadly my view on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Bidder.
Yeah, likewise, I'm supportive of the thrust of the aims and objectives of the condition we're putting on. But I just wonder, Emily, and if we might not have created a slight loophole here, because what we're really talking about is turning left and turning right out of the depot, and we were told on 2 days they want to turn left, right? If we say we can't go through Little Milton, they might turn left anyway, and then go up Church Road through Great Milton, and then just do a little loop round Windmill Lane, Windmill Hill, or go down through Great Hazley, and then get onto, So I'm worried that we will create.
We're in debate, so
I'm debating.
I'm sure that it's debating. Proposal will come back with an answer on that one.
Yeah, so I think we must be careful, councillors, if we are going to approve the Little Milton condition, that we actually stipulate also the condition will basically achieve the left and the right objective. Otherwise, I don't think I could support it, because it could end up creating some perverse incentives for people to do really odd things, to loop round it to still go left.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've said unless they're servicing that area.
We said we wouldn't go through Little Milton.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in debate, so let's sort of organise the debate, or have an organised debate. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, don't we need clarity on that then before we can vote for that? As if it's just
because we haven't. Sorry, we have. That's what the condition amendment will address. I think you've got a very valid point, and I'm sure when they're writing the condition, they will take into account your valid point.
We take it
Yeah.
Could we just defer the application till we've got the condition?
No.
Why not?
We're here now.
Well, I don't think I can vote for it.
Chair, I think I heard you say that you would possibly forward the draft of these conditions to us.
I can do.
If perhaps that would answer Councillor Bearder's issue about that.
But that's too late. We'll have agreed.
Yeah, but you will still have control as a committee. We will still have control of those conditions.
No, because we'll have passed the application.
Yes, but they're subject to conditions.
They're all subject to conditions.
So we'll still have control of those conditions. So you'll be able to examine it later when it's been written by a lawyer.
Is that the case?
Yes. Yes, that's my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're in debate still.
Okay. So yeah, I'm still on the fence at the moment. But yeah, I have concerns about these from the villages that are affected by this. And obviously, I'm very worried about that. I'm worried about Woodcote Effluent, but I think we covered that on condition 6. So I think that's not too bad. But on the other hand, the site is well screened. It's got a good belt of trees at the front. I drove past it this evening, and you can't see the site from the road from the A329. There was a bit of a conflict in the report about the nearest house being 210 metres or 190. I wasn't quite sure which, but I kind of think, well, actually, if it's around about 200 metres, it is quite a long way from the nearest house. So I think that's a point in its favour as well. And I think, all in all, I think what SODC are trying to do is trying to produce quite a nice environment there with a building, with solar panels, and all sorts of good stuff. And they've obviously thought about the interceptor issue. I think we're going to cover that in condition 6. So I think that's great. And there's this issue about vehicles turning the wrong way through other interesting routes to get to where they're going to go, which I think is a very valid point to raise, and it's certainly something for debate.
Okay. If anybody else wish to speak,
Shall I speak now?
No one else wishes to speak. It's your turn.
There's no perfect location for putting a site with this particular use. Nobody would want it ideally close to where they live, and I completely understand all of the concerns that have been raised by the parish councillors, by the local MP, and by the ward councillor. I hope with the changes that we will be making to the 4 condition areas that we can right most of the problems, and that the use of the site and its impact will only become apparent in future years. As Peter, I think, made the point that the previous operation or the current operation has not seemingly caused an enormous amount of problems. Maybe that location is more tucked away from where people live than this one, but there never would be anywhere that you could put an operation like this and the nature of what goes on that site that would affect nobody. And I hope that with the changes that we're going to make, that this will minimise the problems for most people. And that's why I think we should support it.
Thank you, Councillor Topping. I'll turn to the proposer.
Yes, it's just on your thunder. I think we're all very grateful that this application is coming from ourselves. It's from us as a district council. We are here to represent the interests of residents, and we're not. This isn't some application from some commercial operation. We don't know, and we are looking to put lots of conditions on to address the concerns of our residents, both immediately and for the future. And as Councillor Topping says, there's no site is perfect. We all want a site. We all want our bins emptied. We all want our waste recycled. And I think, it's one of the main functions of this district council, and which we have been doing pretty well over the past few years. And I think we'll, with this location, with the conditions we've put on, which I think are the exception of a micromanagement of the traffic suggested by Councillor Bearder, I think are all enforceable and necessary. So I commend this application to us as committee.
Okay, committee. We've had a long debate. It's got a proposal for recommendation, opposite recommendation for approval. Proposer seconded. All those in favour, can you please show? 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. All those against? Abstentions?
Right, today.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that is passed. Thank you very much, committee. A long debate, 2 hours, in fact, yeah, which is now going to have an effect on the rest of the evening's agenda. Yeah, we've got to discuss now what effect it's going to have. Yes, please. Yeah.
I watched that
Right, welcome back, everybody. As you know, it's 8:10 now, when we have a cut-off at 8:30. Okay. So I think we've got to agree to do the next item on the agenda and agree to extend past 8:30 to get to the end of that one. Yeah. But of course, items 3, 4 and 5 now will stay off the agenda. Not be heard now. They will probably, next planning meeting is the 29th of October, so they'll be back on that agenda. Okay, so can we agree to do the next one and work all the way through it? Yeah. All those, yeah, okay, thank you very much. And
Are we agreeing to unlimited extension?
Yeah. Yes, we get through this one, but we get through to the end of it.
Okay.
If it's 9:30, it's 9:30.
I
I don't want it to be.
say on this, James.
We can ban Team Gearless.
You can't, that's the problem.
Right. So this is P25 S0195. Now north of New Road, Lower Shiplake, and the planning officer is Phil Moore. Welcome, Phil. So it's all over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This application is referred to the Planning Committee as the officer's recommendation conflicts with the views of Shiplake Parish Council and is the subject of calling requests from Councillor Rawlins and Councillor Arlett. The application site is located on the southwestern edge of Lower Shiplake and will be accessed by a new road. This is shown on the submitted location plan. The aerial view provides more context in terms of the site and its surroundings. So this is the application site here, these two fields. See, that's in the context of Shiplake Meadows to the northwest. This is New Road. This is Mill Lane. This is the A4155. And this is where New Road meets Crosley Road. We'll take you up to the facilities in Lower Shiplake. The proposal is for 25 dwellings, 40% of which will be affordable, equating to 10 units. The application is an outline form with all matters reserved except for access. The application proposals are contrary to the council's local plan and the Shiplake neighbourhood plan, as the site does not constitute infill development within the settlement of Lower Shiplake or the built-up area of the village as defined in the neighbourhood plan. The material consideration in the determination of the application is the council's 5-year land supply position. The council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable sites, and consequently the tilted balance in favour of granting planning permission is engaged in accordance with paragraph 11D of the NPPF, unless the harm of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. With the made Shiplake neighbourhood plan, paragraph 14 of the NPPF is also a material consideration, which advises that the adverse impact of allowing development in conflict with a neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The proposed access arrangements into the site from New Road are considered by Oxfordshire County Council as local highway authority to be acceptable. New Road itself is a narrow private road of poor construction. However, OCC are satisfied that vehicle movements would remain very low post-development and advise that sufficient space would exist for cars to safely pass pedestrians and cyclists. OCC advised that a reason for refusal on highway safety grounds could not be upheld but appealed. The plan in front of you there is showing site access arrangements into the site from New Road. This is a plan that's showing the available and proposed passing spaces along the section of New Road. And then we have section drawing, which will be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but essentially what that's showing is in section view, there's sufficient width for a car and cyclist and a pedestrian to pass each other along the entire length of New Road. For much of the journey to facilities in Lower Shipley, the footway would be available on Crosley Road and Station Road. As is mentioned in my report, there is a lack of pedestrian-friendly route between the application site and the facilities in Shipley. However, a footway has recently been installed along the A4155, linking Mill Lane with Plough Lane. This is shown the next photo. So this is the A4155, this is the junction with Memorial Avenue, and there is what certainly appears to be a bound gravel footpath that's been put in place, and that runs along the A4155 in front of Shipley College down to Shipley, where it joins Plough Lane, and from Plough Lane there is then a footway that will provide access to primary school.
And that's not in the report that you brought in. Sorry, do you think you could speak up a little bit?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
The site is well screened and visually contained, and the council's landscape officer has raised no objection. The proposals would have an impact on the attractive rural setting of Lower Shipley. However, the proposals seek to mitigate this by retaining the existing boundary vegetation along New Road, providing a 15-metre deep landscape buffer with additional tree and hedgerow planting. As this would not completely screen the development from view, some localised residual harm would remain. So this is the illustrative master plan, and this is the section of existing trees and hedgerow to be retained, and behind it here is shown an additional line of screening vegetation. These are some photographs of New Road. So the first one is at the end of New Road closest to Mill Lane, and this is where there is existing residential development on the western boundary of the application site with a couple of outlying dwellings. The next photograph shows progression down New Road north eastwards towards the application site. So this is the stretch of New Road that would be outside the application site, and you can see the well-defined landscaping buffer to the frontage of New Road. This is continuing to progress along New Road towards Lower Shipley. This is the access point of the larger of the two parcels. And then this is a view from that access point across the application site, where you can see the development of Shipley Meadows. And then again, this is progressing further along New Road. The second of the photographs show the point where the access to the smaller part of the application site would be. Here's a bit more detail. And then this next photo is showing you as you are actually reaching the built up area of Lower Shipley, so towards the end of New Road, closer to Crosley Road. Again, more photos showing context of the built-up area. And then this is a photograph looking down Crosley Road, and this photograph is from that position looking back down New Road. And finally, this is a photograph showing Crosley Road. This is Baskerville Avenue, and you can see the footway side of Crosley Road. Certain elements of the master.
Photos of the private part of Crosley Road, which goes the other way, where the crossroads is, which is the den part.
I'm sorry, I can't have any participation from that. This is a committee. You're here to observe.
Certain elements of the master plan are proposed to be fixed as part of the outline permission through the use of parameter plans. Just run through the parameter plans. These are in the committee report. So this is the main parameter plan. This is the land use parameter plan. This is density parameter plan. And we have the building heights parameter plan. Green and blue infrastructure parameter plan. If approved, the parameter plans will provide a framework for future more detailed design. Will define the type of development that can be brought forward as part of the reserve matters. In conclusion, the application proposals are contrary to the county local plan and the Shiplake neighbourhood plan in terms of the location of the development. However, as the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply, tilted balance in favour of granting the planning permission is engaged. Shiplake neighbourhood plan is in place, and with a defined housing requirement of 0, housing allocations are not required. And therefore, the MPPF para 14 is engaged, which advises that the adverse impact of development in conflict with a neighbour plan is likely to outweigh the benefits. However, this does not mean that this will automatically be the case on every occasion, and each case will still require a balanced judgment of the harm versus the benefits and an assessment of site-specific considerations. The planning balance, therefore, requires careful consideration. With a relatively limited harm that would ensue from the proposed development, residual localised harm to the rural setting of Lower Shipley, weighed against the benefit of contributing towards the council's shortfall in housing supply and delivery of affordable housing, it is your officer's view that on this occasion, benefits presented by the scheme outweigh the harm. Accordingly, the outline application is recommended for approval, subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the obligations and contributions set out in my report and the listed planning conditions.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Nice number of speakers. The first one is Councillor Penrose. And you have 5 minutes when you start speaking.
I'm Chris Penrose, Chairman of Shiplake Parish Council. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. Shiplake Parish Council strongly objects to this application on the grounds that it significantly contravenes both the adopted Shiplake Neighbourhood Plan and the relevant South Oxfordshire District Council's local plan policies, and is disproportionate in how it applies the tilted balance. We urge the committee to reject it. We're concerned that the officer's recommendation is inconsistent with established policy and undermines both the neighbourhood and local plans. The officer's report lacks consistency, appropriate balance, and omits critical elements of ours and others' objections. And in addition, it has brought new information to the table not in his confused report. Let me explain Shiplake's key objections to this application. It contravenes local plan policies H8 and H16. Lower Shiplake is a designated smaller village where development should be limited to infill and previously developed land. This application does not meet those criteria. Lower Shiplake has had excessive cumulative development. In 2011, the whole parish had 630 homes. Let's say 450 of them in Lower Shiplake. It's already accommodated significant growth on its periphery, some in Hobston Parish, but using the facilities and are made sustainable by Shiplake Parish, placing strain on our local infrastructure. Thames Farm, 95 houses. The retirement village, another 65. The former Wyvale site, further 40. Charleston Place, 11 with 16 more proposed. The Beaches, 8. The Pony Fields at the north of the parish, yet to come before us as an application, but they're talking to us now, a further 92 houses. And this new road application, as well as all of the permitted and happy infill, which our neighbourhood plan allows. This is in conflict, not just with a few of our policies, it's in contradiction of the absolute vision of our neighbourhood plan. The proposal undermines our vision to maintain Shiplake's rural character and the separation of its villages. And this was not mentioned by Officer in his report. Nor was the breach of our core objectives, numbers 1, 3, and 5, preserving the rural setting and distinct identity of the villages, preventing elongation into open countryside, and protecting agricultural land between our settlements. The officer acknowledges that this is open countryside and this is agricultural land. It is non-compliant with policy SV1, an infill policy. This is not infill, and officers actually admitted to that in paragraph 6.2 to 6.7 in the report he did something. It's non-compliant with rural housing policy SV2. It doesn't meet the criteria for rural housing in open countryside. And it violates SV 7, 8, and 9 settlement separation, valued landscapes, and character. It reduces the gap between the villages, it harms the landscape character, and negatively affects the village identity. And in addition, lots of residents of New Road, many present here tonight in this room and in others, have mentioned many factors, and we'll hear from New Road residents later. We'll also hear from Councillor Rawlings later, who will talk, I'm sure, about the tilted balance and how we believe it has been misused in this case. The planning officer also fails to mention the transport. Whilst the proposed crossing and pedestrian improvements provide a valuable alternative to private car use, he actually says, I do not consider the proposals fully comply with the policies and aspirations of OCC's local transport and connectivity plan. And this matter should be given due consideration in the LPA's determination of sustainable merits of the development. I will conclude by saying the application would undermine neighbourhood planning in all of our districts if this was to go ahead. An approval would erode public trust and devalue all neighbourhood plans in South Oxfordshire and open up open countryside to non-infill locations to development and that these plans seek to protect. I would ask this planning committee to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Penrose. Committee, have we got any questions for him? I see none. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation.
Thank you. Happy to take questions later if you want me to. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair.
No questions being the agreement? No. Our next speaker is Karen Cooper, who is a neighbour, I believe. Yeah. And again, you have 5 minutes from the moment you start speaking.
Good evening, councillors. Although I sit here on my own, I'm representing the 96 households in Shiplake that objected to the application. To be honest, I'm surprised to find myself here. Over several years, the Shiplake community has invested hundreds of hours producing a neighbourhood plan that was refined by experts at a cost to the taxpayer of thousands of pounds. Residents put their faith and trust into this plan. The application you're considering today is so at odds with the neighbourhood plan and the SODC local plan that residents were confident that it would be rejected out of hand. So the recommendation for approval was a shock, especially as the officer acknowledges and agrees in his committee report that the application conflicts with local plan policies H8 and H16 and neighbourhood plan policies SV1 and SV2. This is evidenced by his comments in para 6.2 to 6.10. He says he doesn't consider the site fulfills the criteria for small gap infill, SV1 and H16. The site is outside the built-up area of the village and doesn't comply with the criteria needed to build in the countryside, SV2. Shiplake, as a smaller village, has no requirement to contribute to the overall housing requirement of the district, H8. So with this direct conflict with key policies, it's hard to understand why other issues are considered, particularly when the planning history shows that previous attempts to develop part of the site were rejected by SODC and the subsequent appeals dismissed. The applicant seeks to use the council's lack of land supply as an argument to sidestep the neighbourhood plan. This is not a valid position, as the plan is less than 5 years old and as such takes precedence over the land supply deficiency in line with NPPF guidance. Having covered policy issues, I now speak of the despair felt by residents relating to a quirk in parish boundaries. On the western side of the A41555, 3 large housing estates are in various stages of construction. All of these are in the parish of Harpston, so are not covered by Shiplake's neighbourhood plan. Yet in every case, the developers have used proximity to Shiplake to justify the sustainability of the sites. This has led to a domino effect, where developers use the sites as justification for attempts to intrude into Shiplake itself. On the topic of sustainability, it's disappointing that OCC has watered down its transport objection, but the officer still makes it clear that OCC remains concerned about the site's sustainability and how inaccessible it is by its walking and cycling. He points out that to reach facilities in Lower Shiplake, people would use New Road and either Crosley Road or Mill Lane. None of these have a proper footpath. They're narrow, and OCC warns that future residents may feel unsafe walking or cycling along them, which could discourage active travel altogether. The vehicle movement assessments consider residents' cars, but the ever-growing volume of delivery drivers in a hurry is an unquantified threat. And if you're trying to get to the village hall or school, it's even more difficult. You have to walk along New Road, which has no pavement or street lighting, then cross the busy A Road. After that, you're faced with either walking along the unlit main road or going up Memorial Avenue, which also has no path or lighting. So despite the softened stance, the County Council's concern about safety and sustainability are still very much on the record. Finally, it's our opinion that the concerns raised by the landscape officer have not been fully addressed, as they haven't been consulted on the latest amendment. Views to the national landscape seem to be swept aside as unimportant. The harm caused to the countryside setting, highlighted by a previous appeals inspector as a reason for refusal, have not been given any weight.
Last 30 seconds.
There are many subjective reasons why this application is undesirable, but tonight I've focused only on hard policy reasons. Please reject this application on the basis of a clear conflict with SODC local planning policies H8 and H16 and Shiplake neighbourhood planning policies SV1 and SV2.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cooper. Richie, have we got any questions? No one seems to have any questions, so thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, our next speaker is Douglas Bond, who is a supporter of this application. In 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application has been carefully prepared to ensure a high-quality housing scheme is delivered, addressing all technical issues, but meeting important housing needs that the district requires. I know the proposal is unpopular with residents, but it is also important to step back for a second and acknowledge the housing challenges facing the council. We all know there's a housing crisis. The planning system requires councils to maintain a 5-year housing land supply. As acknowledged, the council has a deficit. That deficit cannot all be met in one place. There are locations like Didcot already contributing to housing supply. The shortfall needs to be addressed more evenly across the district. Furthermore, the shortfall is going to get materially worse following the failed joint local plan. Where there is a housing land supply deficit, policy confirms that permission should be granted. This is known as the tilted balance. The balance is in favour of the grant of permission unless any adverse impacts clearly and by some margin outweigh the benefits. This is a deliberately high bar. The issue is whether the points raised against the proposal clearly outweigh the undisputed benefits of meeting important housing needs to which policy attracts substantial weight too. The application has been careful to ensure any perceived harms are either designed out or minimised. For instance, this is a field where there will be a change to its character. Pausing here for a moment, to meet the 5-year housing land supply requirement, the council will need to grant permission on fields beyond settlement boundaries. This is an unavoidable consequence. Therefore, the principle of a loss of a field to development located out of the settlement should be accepted. Moreover, the characteristics of the area ensure that this site can be developed without material harm to the surrounding area. This is confirmed by the council's landscape officer, who does not raise an objection to the proposal, noting the site can be developed satisfactorily. This finding might not be repeated on every field within the district, but does suggest that this site is a good one to accommodate much needed new homes. In respect of highway safety, the County Council confirmed that vehicle flows will remain very low, at 1 vehicle every 5 to 7 minutes. With proposed traffic calming, vehicle speeds will not increase. At present, vehicles can safely pass pedestrians and cyclists. This will remain following the proposed development. As a result, these sustainable movements will remain safe and attractive. Accordingly, the proposal is acceptable in sustainability terms. An independent road safety audit also confirms that highway safety will not be compromised. Works to new road can be implemented through permitted development rights. In addition, lawyers confirm that the applicant has the right in law to carry out proposed works to new road. Accordingly, in highway terms, the County Council rightly confirms no objections. The primary benefits associated with the application relate to addressing the under-delivery of housing within the district that have real-world impacts and benefits. The district's lower quartile housing prices and the affordability ratios are higher than the regional average. There is also a persistent under-delivery of affordable housing against quantified needs. The scheme delivers the affordable housing mix required by the council to best meet identified needs. Substantial positive weight should be given to the delivery of much needed new homes. This, together with the ability of the scheme to be satisfactorily accommodated on site without material harm and any other real-world effects, means that the tilted balance remains firmly in favour of the grant of permission.
30 seconds.
This is a good scheme, delivers the right housing for the area and meets important identified needs. These are substantial benefits that can be realised without material harm. This is why your planning officers are recommending the application for approval, and I hope therefore you can accept that recommendation of our planning commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. within time. Committee, have we got any questions? Councillor Sadler?
Yeah, so as you're lecturing us about the tilted balance and
Well, I don't want to lecture
and so forth, with the 5-year housing land supply, you probably know that this very committee sits here and awards planning permission for developments such as land north of Bayswater Brook, but that doesn't sit on the 5-year housing land supply. Do you think it's fair? That was just a question. Do you think it's fair that the residents of Shiplake should have to, take the, have a punitive action put on them because the fact there isn't a 5-year housing land supply, which is just that's just a piece of legal jargon, really. Because we know perfectly well that there are areas of development that we've got in South Oxfordshire, and we're here to represent the residents of South Oxfordshire.
I entirely understand and appreciate the sentiments behind what you've just said. Unfortunately, there is planning policy, but the art of planning is weighing the negatives and the positives to come to a conclusion. And that planning system requires, as a minimum, that the council can deliver 5 years worth of housing land supply at any point in time. Unfortunately, local plan and the suite of neighbourhood plans across district have not been able to maintain that 5-year supply, and you are unfortunately significantly in deficit. And that does have implications in terms of the ability for people to occupy a home. That has social implications, that has mental health implications, it has economic implications, and that is part of the planning balance to which you as a council and members need to weigh up with the perceived harms. And I've tried to imply within my address, and I think supported by the planning officer, this scheme and its characteristics are such that the degree of harm, not to call it that, is minimised to such a level that those benefits outweigh what I perceive those harms to be fairly limited. Hence, the planning officers feel comfortable enough to recommend the application for approval.
Any further questions? Are there any other questions? Councillor Dragonetti.
Yes, you see there's a need for housing in South Oxford and Shipley. What's the evidence for that?
The evidence is the housing requirement, which is derived from a standard method, which has regard to household formation rates, has regard to birth and deaths, has regard to migration, has regard to economic inputs in terms of jobs. You have jobs, you require houses, and all that creates a mix that delivers a particular level of housing need.
Okay.
In addition to that, you've got affordable housing need assessments, which confirms the level of affordable housing need to which, again, there is a significant undersupply.
Okay. Sorry, just turning to your application. What's the need for these large executive homes you've got on the smaller part of the site?
The need for those is that, again, your housing needs assessment, which forms part of your local plan, identifies, albeit a smaller proportion, but nevertheless a proportion of larger homes. That's the first point. The second point is that the policies of the plan require a mix, not only to meet those needs, but a mix that also is compliant with the character of the site and the surrounding area. And those frontage properties are entirely consistent with the character of New Road. The development at the back takes on a different character, which in turn it relates to the scheme further to the west.
One further question? One further question.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
The SMAR 2014 recognises that there should be a 24% of 4-bed plus houses, and your scheme you got 40%. Your proposed list development, which doesn't it seem to me that your scheme is actually equating meeting the need that's been identified by the SMART.
Well,
would you agree?
It responds to the character, which is a relevant consideration, and secondly, direct response to that point is there will be other schemes that provide zero large dwellings. So you have to look at you have to look at it in the round. So for instance, you may have a scheme over 100% 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and zero.
We need to move forward. Are there any further questions? No further questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Bond.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Lee, where is Councillor Rawlins? He's here. I take it Mike Giles is not here.
He's not.
Like everyone else, Lee, you have 5 minutes starting from when you first speak.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, we all believe in a plan-led system, so applications that are in conflict with the local development plan should be rejected. Harm is caused just by that conflict in itself. Of course, the 5-year HLS and tilted balance is back, and the tilt applied should be proportionate to the shortfall. In SODC, that shortfall is not due to a lack of allocations or permissions, but because developers don't believe there's a market for those extra completions. However, paragraph 14 of the MPPF was introduced in 2016 and was extended to 5 years of protection by Go, as long as the LPA had at least 3 years of HLS, which is not in any question here. The paragraph was introduced to ensure that neighbourhood plans and the communities that produce them at great effort and cost were rewarded and not penalised. It was absolutely clear that if an application was contrary to the protected neighbourhood plan, then it should almost always be rejected, irrespective of the tilt. Only where inspectors have judged the MP to be silent or ambiguous on the key matters have the applications gone through in that case. In this case, the report makes it crystal clear that this application is not infill, is in the open countryside and starkly outside the explicit built limits set out in the Shiplake neighbourhood plan. If this clarity is not respected here today, then all neighbourhood plans across the whole district become virtually worthless. In my submission, such a low rating is a radical and harmfully heretical proposition. Paragraph 14 was precisely created to prevent neighbourhood plans becoming worthless, and the new government have not revised it. Paragraph 14 remains solid, unless, councillors, you decide to create a novel and highly dangerous precedent in your decision tonight. Shiplake is a small settlement and was never identified for allocation growth in any local plan, yet it has been hammered by sprawling speculative development. The belief was that once the neighbourhood plan was made, all that would stop. The alternative is that one development after another sprawls into the open countryside like a set of dominoes, falling one after another. And that is why breach of a plan represents such severe harm, and the report at 6.6 acknowledges this truth. There are numerous other issues here. This is not a sustainable location. Normally 400 metres is considered a good green, and up to 800 metres an amber. Above that, or if the passage is unsafe or a poor surface, then it's a red flag. Distances to the primary school and lower Shiplake facilities are 1,200 metres. The school requires crossing the very busy A4155, and access to lower Shiplake requires wading through the unmetalled mud and numerous very large potholes of lower New Road. It won't change, and those drought pictures of the summer don't represent what that is, and I go deeply into it, I know. It's worth noting that OCC policy has moved on since 2016 or 2018 references, and indeed a recent application in Woodlands Road was in part refused for the very reason that the journey across the 4155 and down Station Road was judged too far and poor. Yet here it's suddenly become okay in this report. The report actually suggests that as some much older market homes are isolated, it will be okay for new ones. We have planning for a reason. Those homes are inhabited by people who have cars and resources to own their own home. Here we are suggesting plonking affordable homes and their families with limited means in such an isolated place. Wrong. Kids walking to school or adults walking to work don't want to arrive covered in mud. We've moved on from 1930. There is harm to landscape and character. The landscape officer was never content. Character, as mentioned, is materially harmed and see 6.32 and 6.33. An urbanising crossing is proposed for the A415. Access is uncertain due to the private road rights. Yes, the applicant has shared access rights for a tractor, but not for such intensification of use. Drainage is a challenge and the sewage treatment works is well beyond capacity. It won't get built anytime soon. Councillors, I urge you to refuse this application. The reasons are the principle of the site, contrary to the neighbourhood plan and contrary to SV1, SV2 and the built limits, unsustainable location for social access per the neighbourhood plan, harm to landscape and character, including urbanisation, contrary to the neighbourhood plan SV 7, 8 and 9, uncertain access, and the laughably non-compliant market housing mix. The latest evidence shows for the joint local plan wanted 6% of 4-bedroom homes, not 40%. Why are those houses so there? Because it's a bad site, and we're trying to put on big houses.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlins.
I think you get my question. Any questions?
That's my question. Councillor Sadler.
You mentioned the built area, and in fact, if it's in the report, I didn't see that. Could you just mark out that it's all of that side outside the building?
It's outside the
so the built area is where the existing shops are, and that's it. So this is all.
And if that site happens, then the next domino is lined right up.
Okay, I see.
Sorry. Any other questions, Councillor Clark?
Yeah. How often are neighbourhood plans reviewed?
The paragraph 14 extended the protection to 5 years with the general idea that they would be reviewed on something like a 5-year principle. The 2 years that was originally established by Barwell wasn't really enough. So and generally speaking, I think we with local plans too, we think that something like a 5-year cycle is appropriate.
So you're saying 5 years?
I think 5 years is a reasonable amount, and that's what the protection is offered from the date of being made in the MPPF, and that should stand solid.
Can we clarify that?
That's his looking. That's it.
You said this looks like a very unsustainable site. Why do you think that, given that the local transport connectivity plan for the county council says that we're going to reduce car trip numbers and all that kind of thing, have they agreed to such an unsustainable location?
They've openly flagged it as poor for sustainability. They've accepted the road safety, but they've flagged it as clearly as they can. They've called it out and they've said it's poor. And it's right, it is poor. It is poor for safety, it is poor for quality of footpath, and it is, I think it's actually cruelly unsustainable to put affordable homes in that reservation on the edge of town, on the edge of the village.
Any further questions? Catherine?
Well, no, it's a point of in respect to neighbourhood plans, they're valid for 5 years, and if you want to keep them fit for purpose, you do a midpoint review so that you're ready to get it through before the 5 years is up.
That's correct.
Yes.
Sorry?
5 years is correct.
5 years. Yeah. Yes, that's correct. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rawlins.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Right, we'll go back to the planning on the several questions. I'll say again.
It's good first every time.
No, you first one around, that's what it is.
I'm gonna have a seat every council. So, Phil, the previous applications on this site were refused and upheld at appeal. Reading your report, the balance, all the reason for sort of getting it over the line this time is is because there are more houses in the application and affordable housing. That's it, isn't that's
That's right. Yeah, because
shifting of
the balancing exercise is balancing the benefits against the harm. So there are more limited benefits of 2 or more houses contributing or making a meaningful contribution towards the absence of a 5-year land supply. Then there are 25 houses, of which 10 of those would be affordable. And on the previous schemes, they wouldn't have any affordable housing. So it's how you apply that balance. So there is greater benefit from this scheme versus the previous schemes, plus it's being determined in the light of government's clear drive for housing.
Okay, so it's the increased supply, but balance is clearly a bit subjective. Have there been any sort of big cases or precedents or anything that was sort of make it clear that it shifted the balance?
What the previous schemes and how they've been?
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I've looked at appeal decisions where there are neighbourhood plans in place that made allocations, and inspectors have considered that, but have reached a conclusion that because the land supply situation is so poor for that particular authority, they granted permission anyway. So I would advise that you can't really look at what happens on other sites and try and determine what to do through those. It's a case of looking at the particular merits of this site, what the harm is, and there is, as I've mentioned in my report, there is harm, residualised local harm because of the mitigation measures that are being put in place. So say it is balancing what is the intrinsic harm that is coming from this development and the conflict with the major plan, and weighing that against the need to grant planning permission following the tilt balance.
Okay, and presumably last time it came around, we still had the same issue with housing supply, so that hasn't changed.
They were 2 different occasions. One of the schemes went to appeal where we didn't have a 5-year land supply. One of the schemes went to appeal,
and we won both.
Okay, Councillor Wheeler.
Councillor Rawlings brought up paragraph 14, Michael Gove's protection with the neighbourhood plans. What's your explanation as to why you've demurred from that?
It is on reading of paragraph 14 itself. What the MPPF says is that where paragraph 11D is engaged and you apply the tilted balance, because you don't apply the land supply, where that relates to a neighbourhood plan that is less than 5 years old and makes housing applications, then the harm to that neighbourhood plan is likely outweigh the benefits of the scheme. The MPPF doesn't say it will. It doesn't say it will always. And it doesn't say you should refuse schemes that are in conflict with a neighbourhood plan. It has that element judgment in it. Now, I've engaged extensively with policy colleagues in the neighbourhood planning team, and I received advice from them, which backs up that exact point, that MPPF paragraph 14 is not bar to development. So you still have to consider.
I see what you're saying. So you're saying that it doesn't rule it out, but it creates a subjective point for you to make.
There's an extra layer of protection, but there's what's called planning balance. It's a balancing exercise of what is the harm here, what are the benefits, for and your refusal that's tested with appeal. That's going to be considered.
And Councillor Norman.
Related to that question, we've seen a string of speculative planning applications which are contrary to the local plan and to neighbourhood plans. And in this string, they are always recommended for approval because of the tilted balance and the lack of 5-year housing land supply. You said you consulted with colleagues. Is there a written or unwritten guidance within the planning department which says that in every case, irrespective of the unsuitability of the site, that the tilted balance will come down in favour of recommending approval?
No.
Or is this left to the individual officer?
Yes, it is an exercise of planning judgment.
No more questions? No more questions? You got a question?
I'm working out.
Just trying to work it out. It's 9 o'clock, Peter.
All right. Okay. So that does this development does produce some harm, does it not? Because it extends the impacts the attractive rural setting of Lower Shipley, and it's contrary to the neighbourhood plan in preventing further creep into the open countryside. So it does. So this application does create harm, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's clearly acknowledged in
which we put out.
Yeah.
So we can. Sorry, I'm trying to work out all these NPPF, all these paragraphs. So NPPF para 14, because it does have an adverse impact, which could be in our judgment, we're the decision makers in this case, can outweigh the benefits.
Yes.
So it's our decision. That's fair enough. We're deciding to exercise, make this decision. Yes, because we think there's a harm outweighs the benefits. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Therefore, I need a proposal. Yeah. Councillor Higgins.
I'm going to propose that we refuse the measure.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Have a seconder. Your reasons for refusal.
If I just have the last half page of what Lee said. I
think Peter gave you a clue a moment ago.
Yeah. So in far less eloquent terms than Lee used. So the integrity of the local plan, that balance with the local plan, I appreciate in considering it, the officer has made, has had to look at the balance and the tilted balance and make a judgment call to some degree. But I think the point was very well made about the risk of, undercutting local plans everywhere. If we're going to ride roughshod over them. So, there's a string of other things to be concerned about. The context of the affordable homes and the ability of people in those affordable settings to travel to facilities and school, not by car, some of the environmental and transport concerns identified. A list
goes on. I'm sure Emily can have something up after that one, because we need to be very clear as to why you've got a recommendation for refusal on this one. We need to be absolutely certain.
I think when Ben said local plans, he meant neighbourhood plans.
Sorry, I didn't mean neighbourhood plans. Yes, sorry,
Phil said it's against the neighbourhood plan, it's against the local plan.
It is, but I think he meant neighbourhould planning.
Yeah, so that was the point, about undercutting the neighbourhood plan.
Could I add it's an unsustainable location according to SODC?
Yeah.
And I'll let Councillor Beeder speak if he wishes to.
Can I retain all my rights?
Retain all your rights. It's open for debate then. Is there any debate? Councillor Arlott.
Yes, Chairman. Unfortunately, for me probably, I have a totally different view from the proposal. We've all sat here, Jim from obviously Barton. We've seen what happened there a few months ago. My colleague from Didcot and even in Henley, and I'm speaking as a district councillor, not as a Henley Town or Shipley councillor. And we've all had to take these extra properties. We've got another Highlands Park just up where I live. We've got another 135 coming on stream up there. Another 20 flats going to come up here. We were given, some of you actually voted for it, and I didn't, along the end of the Fair Mile, voted for 80 flats along there, which weren't in our neighbourhood plan. We always expect the worst when an application comes forward. And 9 times out of 10, it's nowhere near as bad as what people think. And a prime example where I live, Highlands Park, we're going to get thousands of extra cars, blah, blah, blah. We'll be down Elizabeth Road where I live. Nothing at all. It just didn't happen, It's not like that. The thing is with this here, well, the the major problem I have with this, and no one's mentioned, is the developed down the bottom there. Audley, I think it's called Audley Meadows, about 64 properties down there. That went to appeal, and the developer won the appeal. My view on this, when you look at what's being proposed there, 25 units, they could have probably got 70 on there. Another developer could have come forward with. You've got 25 units there, of which 10 is affordable. How many properties around there are affordable? Probably very few, I'd say. I think the majority are probably 4 or 5 bedroom houses. You've got a chance of affordable houses, youngsters coming into the village, but for some reason, the speakers I've listened to don't wish this. I think this is a good application here. And dare I say, looking at the Audley Meadows one, the way they won the appeal, I would imagine if this goes to appeal, I would think they'll win that quite easily. I'll be surprised if they don't. And so I'm speaking solely as a district council. I think you've got an excellent application in front of you. And, we've all got neighbour plans. We've all had to suffer for one thing or another in numbers, but it hasn't really affected us. And I would say the answer is no. So I will definitely vote against the proposal for refusal.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Norman.
I also think it's an excellent application, but I'm going to vote for the proposal because it's in the wrong place. And it's in the wrong place because it's not in the neighbourhood plan. And I think this is a red line. If we simply allow, as Councillor Rawlings and the other speakers objecting to this have very cogently argued, if you allow applications that are out with the neighbourhood plan and out with actually the local plan as well, then really the game is up. And there's no point in parishes spending years producing neighbourhood plans, having them approved, because they have to be compliant with the local plan and compliant with the National Planning Policy Foundation and everything like that. There's no point in them at all. And so I think that the neighbourhood plans should be near sacred, and therefore I'd be supporting the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, I picked up Phil Moore talks about what's the harm, and obviously the biggest harm here is that it's against the neighbourhood plan. And in terms of unsustainable living, as exemplified by Steve Rawlings himself, and he pointed to things like a new road and the difficulty of traffic getting down there and the danger posed by people having to do that. There was other roads mentioned, but I can't remember all the names. But essentially, if you look at all those pictures, it's clearly not suitable for an urbanisation the size of that. The Shiplake has already received a number of projects, as exemplified by Councillor Penrose and Karen Cooper, I believe. I think we're talking about a number of different things that have been put already, imposed on Shiplake, if you like. And I know particularly from my own ward in Chinner, this is something that keeps happening as well. I do feel for Shiplake terribly over this, because it's just one more here and just one more here, and so, well, a few more here and a few more here, and it just keeps on creeping like that. The fact that it's outside the development zone as well, it's not infill, it's not backland development or anything like that. It's a completely piece of virgin countryside. I don't think that's where we want to go. It will ruin the rural character, and so forth. In terms of affordable housing, at this committee, we also had to deal with Chalgrove, and one of the things they said there was that in actual fact, a lot of these affordable housing units are not being filled, and in fact they're going to take people from areas that are completely alien to those people from other areas such as the suburbs of London, and bring them out to rural Oxfordshire, where they can go and occupy one of our affordable housing developments. So I don't really believe in it. I've lost trust in this belief that we just need more and more affordable housing. In terms of the larger housing, and I know Councillor Rawlings feels quite strongly about this. If we do just keep on building large executive housing, then it's really targeted at the London market. market. Ultimately, it's about people moving out from the suburbs into more rural areas. I'm not against that, but you just can't just keep on building and building and building. Simple as that. So overall, to sum it up, I'm against.
Right, does anybody else wish to speak? I'll go back to Councillor Baylor then.
Well, I know I'd rather have representing me, Councillor Rawlings, who an excellent summary of the key points, and Councillor Arlett. I thought we were going to be on the same side of this argument tonight because you called it in. You just called in things for fun. I support that. I'll call that in and wallow in it. I don't understand. I think you've become too cynical, of the absolutely dire, broken procedures that we have to work under. It's chronic that we have our communities, we put our communities, we subject them to years and years, Wheatley's local neighbourhood plan with years in the making, hours and hours of work. And then for us to sit here and say it's meaningless, right? People come to me. You said, does it really matter?
I chaired one for 5 years.
Yeah.
So don't accuse me.
So that's why I'm surprised at. Because and I have had councillors come to me and they say, do you think we should bother with these neighbourhood plans, Tim? And I say, well, it gets you a bit more SIL money, because that's effectively all they do. So I'm completely with Councillor Norman, Councillor Sutherland here, all the colleagues that say that something has to be sacrosanct, and if we lose on appeal, we will have made a point here, and we can take this to government. We can, through our MP, we can take this to government, to Labour government, and say, what are you doing here? Just scrap the stupid things if they're meaningless, and the inspector overrules them. So I hope he doesn't, and I hope that he respects the opinions and the views and the hard work of the local community that are represented here today. And I will be voting in favour of the motion to reject it.
Thank you, Councillor Baylor. I'll go to Councillor Higgins to sum up, but we do need to clarify what the reasons are.
Okay, and I can't ask for these notes. So the leading point for me is the balance. This point 14, the balance that's struck between the neighbourhood plan and the presumption that the neighbourhood plan is to be overruled in very rare circumstances, and the local housing supply, and protecting the status of the local plan and its place in the system, I think, is vitally important. And then also, following reasons, the sustainability of the location, the concerns raised around around the transport and access to the site, the suitability of the location for affordable homes given the 1.2 kilometre distance to the local school, and some of the concerns around that. Do I have enough?
That's all to do with local plans. That's sustainability, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Landscape plan.
Emily's writing these down because she's going to write the refusal. And that's got to then stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got to be sure what these reasons are. Yeah.
So can I just suggest, committee, you'd be looking at potentially 3 refusal reasons. The first one would be that the proposed development would be contrary to the local plan policies H8 and H16, the Shiplake neighbourhood plan policies SB1 and SB2, as it is not located within the settlement of Shiplake or the built-up area defined in the neighbourhood plan. The proposed development would be in conflict with the core objective of the neighbourhood plan to conserve and enhance the rural character of the area. And it is not considered a sustainable location in relation to transport and infrastructure, and is also contrary to para 14 of the MPPF. So that would be refusal reason 1. Refusal reason 2 would be the failure to secure affordable housing and infrastructure, and refusal reason 3 would be failure to provide 10% biodiversity net gain. The last 2 can be resolved through the completion of a Section 106 agreement, but would need to appear on the decision notice as separate reasons for refusal.
You need not just to be on the book.
Yeah,
After you get
we
them
need to include those. Is that a fair reflection of the concerns you have as a committee?
Yeah, I
think so.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're all content with that. Have you summed up then, Ben? Are we?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Yes, all right. So, if you've summed up, we now need to. We can't do anything else if Ben's summed
Just
up.
the local plan gets to look in.
Yes, the
Yes,
local
local plan policies and
local
neighbourhood
plan,
plan policies and the
yeah.
NPPF will all be referenced
Yeah.
to.
All those in favour of the recommendation for refusal on those reasons, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8. All those against the proposal, 1, and abstaining. Well, of course, Christian already said he wasn't going to put part in this one. So it's an abstention effective. Thank you very much, committee. It's been a long evening. It's 5:45, so thank you very much for your perseverance. And the right